you miss me? I've been out of it comatose, but the depression is.
Hello and welcome to Controlled Burns, the new hobby list podcast hosted by me, SlowBurne from Wildfire Gaming. This week I'm welcoming back to the podcast Sean to finish out his top 25 list that we started last week. Sean, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Well, we had some really fun discussion breaking down Sean's list so far, which is very unique from the other two lists that we've heard so far in this series. So that's very fun. And it's to the point where we had to break it down into two episodes, which was an executive decision we made on the fly just because of how long it was taking to do the list in one go. So last time we went through numbers 25 through 11. So we saved the top 10 for today. So before we get into the new list, I am gonna read back through the first 15 so that everybody can get caught up. But before we get into that, you can listen to the show on all the major podcasting networks. That includes Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and YouTube. And you can write into the podcast at ControlledBurnes with an ES at gmail.com. Okay, so for those who missed episode one, these are the games that Sean has on his list so far. So at number 25, we have Dance Dance Revolution, 24, Beat Saber, 23, Halo 3, 22, Guns the Duel. I mean, that is a unique pick. You're not going to hear that one every day. Number 21, Disgaea 4, number 20, RuneScape, number 19, Diablo 3, number 18, Fallout 76, number 17, Dead Rising, number 16, Resident Evil Village. Number 15, Tropico 5. Number 14, Civilization 5. Number 13, Guitar Hero 3. Number 12, Rock Band 2. And number 11, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. That takes us up to the top 10. That is really quite a list. It's very I don't think you're gonna find anyone else in the universe that is gonna have that top 25 that Sean has. So I congratulate you on having a unique list.
Thank you. It does feel very unique. Every time I look at it, I'm like, is this really? And yes, I've reconsidered it several times, and every time I do, I settle on this being just right.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm changing my list all the time, and I'm always thinking about it. And I've already made a major change on my list since I recorded my episode, which was episode 2. So that was, I guess, a little over a month ago now, probably. And it is Bloodborne has actually moved up on my list even
Oh,
because I played it again. So I actually haven't played it since I think 2021 was when I got the platinum trophy in it. And I don't even think that I played it a lot then. I think I was just like cleaning up a couple of things. So it's mostly pretty much 2020 since I really was going through it. And so I after I got the platinum trophy, I just didn't really mess with it again. There was like what we started up, like you mentioned in the last episode, we did start up a playthrough of it, so I have like that character, but that was like pretty early in the game. And then I had this guy come over that there's this neighbor that I have, and he might end up on giving his list on the show too. He's a little bit younger than we are. He's like 20, early 20s. But his grandmother lives next door to me, and so he comes over every once in a while and we'll hang out. And I introduced Bloodborne to him,
hmm.
and that was cool, but he was playing obviously, but just to like show it to someone else that had never played it before. But yeah, this last week, pretty much just in a week, I pretty much it was pretty much when I got through. I think maybe it stretched back to early last weekend, so maybe it's been a little over a week now, but I showed it to Reagan, and obviously she's not really like super interested in all the combat-y stuff, which is mostly what that game is. But I got like a lot deeper into the weeds than I ever had before on like all like the item descriptions and stuff, and like trying to suss out the lore and whatnot.
Oh, nice.
And that was like really fun, like actually like reading through all that stuff. Because most games they'll give you things to read, but it's usually pretty ancillary. But in like the FromSoft games, like it's a lot more of like the lore of the universe or of the world or whatever is like kind of told through that, and even the characters to a certain degree, because how they do their stories, it's like very esoteric and like not really spelled out.
Right. Very subtle.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool to like go through it that way. And also I just hadn't played it in a few years, and I just reminded myself how much I loved it. So yeah, it's currently sitting at number 2 on my list, up from number 5.
Oh,
So that was a pretty major shift, because anytime anything shifts up there for me, it's pretty rare. Because like, and I imagine that's probably the case for you too, right? Because like, other than we do have one fairly new entry in your top 10, which we'll get to obviously. But other than that, these have all been around for at least a few years, I think.
Yes, yeah, pretty consistent.
Yeah.
I would say it was probably 2020 and 21 when I was playing number 10 the most.
Okay, great. Well, you want to get into it and tell us what it is?
Yes, number 10, The Elder Scrolls Online.
Okay, see now this is an interesting one to me. We talked last week about how I'm not like a big MMO guy. I've really never played any. The closest I ever came was I played a very small amount of World of Warcraft like many years ago. I was still in high school. But yeah, I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan, huge Bethesda fan. And I've spent other than probably Fallout 4, I think Skyrim is probably the game that I've played the most. And obviously number one is Fallout 4, so also in that same vein. But I've never played Oblivion or anything like earlier in this series, so it's really just Skyrim, I guess, when it comes to Elder Scrolls. But I'm curious about like how this MMO sort of matches up with those games, because like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I never remember you being like a big Elder Scrolls guy either.
Well, I really enjoyed Oblivion, and
Okay.
I never super duper got into Skyrim, but I did enjoy the time that I spent on it. Like defeated the first dragon, learned the first shout, and then didn't get any farther in the story, just kind of explored some
Yeah, yeah,
caves and called it a day.
sure.
But with the Elder Scrolls Online, I love honestly everything about it. The stories that it tells, the unique
Really?
characters to that game that reappear throughout the different campaigns. Who ironically enough, I can't remember super well right now because it's been several years, but there was a
Right.
character in the game that we thought about like if we had a girl, we would have named our child
Wow.
after.
Interesting. So is this something that
Um,
you and Taryn played together?
yes,
Okay,
which I think is probably part of what
sure.
makes it so special for me.
How does that
Um,
work? I'm curious. So you guys just like get on different PCs or whatever?
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we would just be sitting right next to each other, playing on our own computers.
See, this does
There's
sound
a
fun. Like this is something that I've thought about with Reagan as well, because we do play games together, but we haven't taken it to that step. Which this is kind of goes back to a little bit of what we were talking in the last episode, where we were kind of lamenting the death of split screen co-op games, right? And so we've done like some of those, and then we'll play games like like the Heavy Rains or the Mass Effects or things like that, where one person can be making the choices, the other can still be controlling it. And so we've done that a fair bit. But thinking about like something like Fallout 76 or Elder Scrolls Online, like that, the concept of like playing those together, that is very enticing. Now, obviously,
oh
yeah, I
yeah.
don't know what about Taryn's history as a gamer, but Reagan is not like she hasn't played a ton of like super hardcore stuff. Like, mostly it's, she grew up in like the DS Wii generation, so a bunch of shovelware crap that was available on those consoles. But before meeting me, like she was not like super into stuff, but she has played stuff since. So I'm wondering if she could like handle a game like this.
Um, Probably like the story mode, the player versus environment, as they call it, is pretty easy when you're just going through the various campaigns and quests.
Hmm.
There are a lot of skills and a lot of depth that can go into it if you're trying to do like the hardest content in the game. But if you're
Sure.
just doing the basic content, you can really just go around swinging your sword and not worrying about the skills that much, and you will have a fun time.
Yeah.
But if you want to really get into the weeds of it, there are you can have two weapons equipped at once, and you can have five skills equipped to each weapon. And you can have a really solid rotation where you're swapping back and forth, hitting the skills because you do a
Sure.
lot of damage over time abilities. At least on the character that I played, I was a Dragon Knight. Um,
Cool.
I say was as though he's gone. He's still there. I am a Dragon Knight.
There you go.
But he it does a lot of damage over time effects, and it's really fun to just keep up with all that stuff and be like keeping up with several timers at once and the rotations and your cooldowns. I don't know. It's the real nerd part of MMOs. And I think that Elder Scrolls Online just does it very well with like the how to describe it as being different from WoW, for example.
Yeah.
It's
Well, is
the
it?
fact that
Well, go ahead. I
y-
was just gonna say like when I think about the gameplay, I was gonna ask like how you would compare it to like an actual Elder Scrolls game, like like a Skyrim or Oblivion. Like I think about the gameplay loop and style of like the brief time I spent with World of Warcraft and Skyrim, like very differently. Obviously, first person perspective probably helps with that. Is it a first person game?
it can be first person or third person.
Okay.
Um, and I played in first person right up until the hard content because immersion, yay.
Sure.
But once you get to where you're running dungeons,
Yeah.
especially if you decide to be a tank, because it has the like tank DPS healer setup, though
Yeah.
every class can play all three roles, which is something that I love about the game.
Okay.
I think it is very impressive the fact that they've made it not only possible but viable that if I wanted to on my guy, I could change my build and be a healer
Yeah.
instead of a damage dealer. Um, but anyway, yes, third person is kind of necessary to really get into the deep part of it, or maybe not. I don't know. I've never watched anyone who's truly good at the game to know if they play in first person, but I couldn't keep up with it that way.
Yeah. It's interesting that this is because I mean, I don't want to spoil anything on the list coming up, but I believe this is your top MMO. So like is like the Elder Scrolls sort of I guess like aspect of it like a part of what puts it over the top for you over like some of the other MMOs that you've played, or is it more like kind of what you're talking about here with this like the flexibility of the gameplay and being able to do all the different fill all the different roles and things like that?
I think the gameplay itself is actually what makes it my favorite. I do
Okay.
enjoy the Elder Scrolls aspects because they do touch on all the games. Like there's a Morrowind section and a Skyrim and an Oblivion. And all of the quest lines are fun. And they really do a lot of cosmetic stuff
Okay.
and housing stuff that I think is a
Hmm.
lot of fun.
Yeah, I could see that. I really got into the housing aspect of it because like in the I never played Sky. I played Skyrim a little bit later than release, so like by the time I played it, it had all the DLC and stuff, and they had like the home building. I think you could do homes before this, but like you could actually like build a home kind of from scratch. It wasn't really from scratch, like you were. It was kind of like you're working with presets, but still like your guy was out there hammering, and like it builds up over time. You had to have the materials and stuff, and I really enjoyed that probably a lot more than I expected for especially for something that was such a realistically a small part of the game. Like I always really got into that. So that definitely sounds fun. I am curious just because I love Skyrim so much. I do want like in terms of MMOs that I would be interested in trying. The Elder Scrolls is definitely very high. Probably number one for me would be Final Fantasy 14 just because I'm such a Final Fantasy fan and I never hear people stop talking about how great it is. But Elder Scrolls would probably realistically would probably be my number two pick. So I'm wondering if like how easy or difficult it would be for me to get into it as a fan of the series, but having not been a big MMO player before.
Okay, it is my opinion that the Elder Scrolls Online is the most approachable MMO that I've ever played,
Oh,
and
okay.
I just don't feel that way about Final Fantasy 14, having played both of them.
Okay, I believe you.
Um,
It's very intimidating, Final Fantasy 14, no question.
Now, there is one thing that I will say about Elder Scrolls Online at the beginning, especially if you decide to get ESO Plus,
Okay,
which is their premium membership that allows you to play all of the DLC for a monthly cost without having to buy any of them individually.
I see.
Um, and that is, you will get a barrage of quests right when you start the game.
Sure.
And so it can feel like what the hell am I supposed to do? But if you stick to the zone quests and the main quest of where you start out, you can have a really good time and then like figure out from there, okay, this is gonna take me to a new zone when I start this quest.
Got it.
Um, it's just a really user-friendly experience, though I was pretty confused the last time I tried to come back to it, because I have so many campaigns going on and so many daily quests to do and so many like crafting quests to do
Sure.
every day, that I kind of got on and got right back off because I unfortunately did not have very long to play. I was like, I'm gonna just check this out for a minute and remind myself what I loved about it. Oh, right, I remember, but I don't have the time for any of it.
Yeah, yeah. That's a thing too. It's just like they're these games are such huge time sinks. But yeah, it does sound fun. I know that my cousin Brett, who I don't think it's gonna be his top 25 or anything, but I remember him getting into it at one point and really enjoying it a lot too. So I've heard great things, and it's impressive because it's been around for a pretty long time at this point. So they definitely have had some longevity with it. So that's pretty impressive. But yeah, it's just MMOs in general, like they do just the thought. I mean, I think part of it is just my inexperience with them, but they do kind of stress me out to like think about like trying to actually get into one. But I do feel like if I ever do, then like I said, Elder Scrolls will be pretty high on the list. I think maybe that intimidation factor is part of what has kept me from your number nine as well, even though they're
Oh,
not exactly similar. So I am curious, just because it's it's just it's so big and it seems like fairly complex in terms of the RPG-ness of it. But yeah, go ahead and break it to us here. What number nine is?
truly one of the greatest games ever made. Honestly, I've debated putting it higher on the list, but it's still settled here anyway. Number nine is Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anybody that has played this that didn't say it's one of the greatest games of all time. So I'm sure it's phenomenal. Obviously, it is the newest game on your list, but honestly, I don't know if I really registered that you were into this until you were like, yeah, I gotta have Baldur's Gate 3 at number nine. So I guess yeah, tell me about how you got into this and I guess how similar is it to like other what do you want to call them, CRPGs or whatever, like this one that you've played?
So it's not actually similar to any RPG I've ever played
Okay.
because it's in that D&D format.
Right.
And I coincidentally, just before it was coming out, I was in a country band and we were going to play a D&D campaign together.
Okay.
But it didn't come to fruition because I left the band, unfortunately. But I learned a friend of mine gave me a Dungeons and Dragons manual. So I had been reading up on the game and then heard about Baldur's Gate 3, heard about heard about all the fucking basically, and was like,
Yeah.
wow, that sounds just revolutionary. D&D and sex in a game. Cool. Very cool. Maybe not quite so primitive as that, but I heard about it through Reddit pretty much and was seeing news about it and was like, sure, sounds cool. I'm going to try this out. And then was just super impressed by the amount of detail to it, the storytelling, the skill system, the amount of options you have in pretty much any situation to handle a conflict. You can be really creative in that game, or you can be like me, kind of a Neanderthal,
Yeah.
just stumbling through it. Taryn was sort of making fun of me the other day because I missed some key decisions that resulted in the deaths of many, many people.
Wow.
Yes. And she has not quite finished the game, but she's played it much more thoroughly than me. All the people that died in mine survived in hers.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that
And
because this is I know that you can play this co-op, right?
you can, but it has to be on different systems. And the
Okay.
way our house is right now, we don't have access to both of our PCs at the same time.
Got it.
unfortunately. I was literally earlier today, actually, kind of thinking about this list. I was playing some Baldur's Gate 3, and because I've got it on PC and console, and I was hoping that they have crossplay.
Hmm.
They apparently, I can't remember the site that I was reading this on, but it was from early September. They've apparently announced that they're going to add crossplay, but they don't seem to have it yet.
Okay.
But whenever they add that, we're most likely going to do a co-op playthrough, although she'll probably want to finish hers first. But it's how else to describe how good it is?
Well, I'm curious about like the gameplay aspect of it because I think that's maybe what intimidates me the most, just because just from what I hear, it's like a very open system, and I hear that sometimes it is a challenge for people to get into. So I was curious about how easily or difficult you found it to get into. Granted, you might be a little bit slanted since you were like reading the book of on D&D probably mechanics before you played, but like what was your experience there? Like how easy was it for you to
it
get into it?
was not very easy for me to get into it. I didn't understand it very well at first. There were actually some things that I didn't understand before I saw Taryn do them, like
Sure.
jumping places.
Okay.
Um, it doesn't just tell you like, hey, by the way, if you get stuck, you can maybe just jump over a pit. You just have to like look at your it. You can see at any time that you can jump, but it just didn't occur to me to try it at certain spots until I saw her do it, and then I went, oh, wow, that makes me feel stupid.
Okay.
But and just little things like that where like it really does not hold your hand. You really have to just go in and be curious about it. But that makes it really satisfying when things work. Like when you go, I wonder if I could just push this thing off the side of the cliff instead of fighting it. Oh, okay. Yes, I can. Sweet. That
Mm.
worked. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
that's
can't
really
loot that
cool.
thing now, but I'm glad that I thought to try that.
Right. Yeah, I mean
Uh,
that level of interactivity is very impressive. I guess like the closest thing I can think of to that is like when I played Breath of the Wild in particular, I'm playing through, I mean it's very slowly going now, but Tears of the Kingdom, it has a lot of interactivity to the world and a lot of like kind of interesting mechanics that you can mess with that let you sort of almost break things in ways, but it's like all they know that and like they do it they have purposefully like set these things up where you can like kind of come up with your own system. A good example is like there's this recurring side quest in the game where there's this guy that's holding up these signs and he's just like that's literally all he's trying to do. He's just literally trying to hold up these signs. And you have to like construct these things to hold them up using just like random crap like boards and nonsense to like hold it up long enough for him to like tie the base down. And they're
huh.
just like, go nuts, however you want to do it. And like, there's no guidance whatsoever, but it's just like, you just kind of, because you can like put stuff together in that game with this mechanic, like you just kind of just put some shit together real fast and like see if it works. And if it doesn't, like, all right, let me
Wow.
try something else. So like that kind of like openness to the designs is, I could see how that would be very satisfying, but also like, wow, like kind of intimidating.
Yeah, but there is, it partially depends on what class you pick because, like, the first playthrough that I did, my character was Evildoer McBad Guy.
Right.
And I was going to be very evil, but Taryn encouraged me not to because it was our first playthrough and she wanted to see what it was like to not be a dickhead to everybody. But he was a warlock, and that was a lot more challenging than the character that I've made for console, which is a ranger.
Okay.
Ranger is very straightforward. You have abilities, obviously, but you're doing a whole lot more just attacking. I say warlock is complicated. You really do a whole lot of casting the same ability, Eldritch Blast. But I won't get too in the weeds about all that jazz. You'll see for yourself if you ever play a warlock.
Okay.
Um, um, but point being, how complex it is sort of depends on the path you choose in
Sure.
terms of the team you pick.
Is it turn-based?
It is turn-based.
God, I mean, I love turn-based stuff. I'm sure that if I played this, that I would really get into it. This is another one
Oh
where,
yeah,
it's kind of funny because I keep going back and mentioning Brett, kind of like how you kept mentioning that. What was it, Brian? Who was it that you were talking about?
Brian.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
he's
Um,
about to come up soon. In fact.
oh, excellent. But like you and Brett have more crossover than that's kind of surprising because like you both really played and enjoyed Elder Scrolls Online, for instance, and then he really got into and absolutely loved Baldur's Gate 3. If it's not number one on his list, it's very high. So we'll have
Ooh.
to see where that lands whenever he comes on the podcast and does his top 25. But yeah, like he was. I don't know. I think he maybe was in the like the preview cycle maybe a little bit more than you were. It sounds like it's like I remember him like calling me and being like last year, and he was like, "Yeah, this Baldur's Gate 3 that's coming out, it's going to be game of the year, no question." And I was like, "Well, I'm sure that it'll be great," but I was like, "I don't know if it's going to be to the level of like the mass adoption, to be at that level." But it absolutely was. It did win like pretty much all of the game of the year awards. So I'm sure that I would love this game if I get into it, and I'm sure that I will. Honestly, the probably the main thing that has prevented me from doing it is I have like a lot of things that I'm playing at any given time, and it's like huge, like right, it's like a really massive game, and then also they're still selling it for $70. I'm like, you know, it's
Oh.
like I can get it whatever. It's not 70.
And quite frankly, my experience so far is that I have enjoyed it more on PC than on PS5.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It's interesting that you bring up like the you said that you liked it better on PC than on console. I wonder how it would run on my PC because I just got a new laptop and it's actually we put it through its paces a little bit. It's actually a lot more powerful than I thought. And I think I could actually like run some games on this thing. So I have been
Ooh.
thinking about because on my old laptop I could play like some of the old stuff. Like we played some Age of Empires together that time and it ran just fine.
Yes.
But obviously, like something like Baldur's Gate 3 is a lot more high end than that. But yeah, this thing is actually not bad. So that is a viable option for me on being on PC. But I'm just so used to playing things on console that it's hard to say. But what was it about playing on PC that you liked better?
Well, the way the skills are laid out is very different. Like on PC, you just have your skill bar in front of you all the time,
Okay,
and you can look at all of your options for what you can do. Whereas on console, the UI, you would maybe actually prefer this. The UI is a lot cleaner. You don't have your bars on the screen all the time. You have to press a button to bring up your skills.
sure,
And then you have to like scroll through a couple menus to get through them all and use a scroll wheel instead of them being on action bars. But it's not really, had I started on console, maybe I would not feel such a preference for PC, but I beat the whole game on PC first.
Hmm,
And I am kind of I lean toward PC in general. Like a game that is not on this list, but really kind of should be because it's also great. The Resident Evil 4 remake.
sure.
I recently bought it on PC because I couldn't beat it on console. I was like, I know that I'm better at shooters on PC, and I can beat it on this. I have not done so yet, but it's going a lot smoother than it was on PS5 when I tried to play that. But story for another day.
Right.
Um,
Well, before we move on, I just on that is kind of interesting because were you always more of a PC guy, or is this a fairly new development?
I've gone back and forth over the
Okay.
years. When I was playing Guns to Duel, I was more of a PC guy.
Right.
But but that was at the same time that I was playing Halo, as I mentioned in the
Yeah.
last episode. So I was also very into consoles then.
Yeah, I never really
Um,
when we were living together, I never really I always thought of us as more console players, but then at the same time, like when I think back on the stuff we were doing for our channel, obviously like a lot of that, like Knights of the Old Republic, for instance, like that was very PC, and like a lot of the early one-offs were random Steam games that we were playing. Um,
yes.
and like obviously like before that, you were playing Civilization, which obviously was a exclusive to PC. And even you remember technically the first I don't know if we even like technically recorded these or not, but remember when we played State of Decay as like a kind of a test run?
Oh yeah, I
That
do
was on
remember
PC
that.
as well.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting that I've noticed like since then that you certainly have gravitated more toward PC. But yeah, it's that's kind of an interesting transition because like for me, obviously, I've always been very much on the console side.
I just feel a lot more control with the mouse than I
Sure.
do with the right analog stick.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I would say, oh, cat in the lap. Okay. Anyway, I would say that's about like 80% of it right there.
Yeah.
Um, I like the freedom of the keyboard and having more buttons available to me. Um, but what I really like is the freedom of VR at this point.
Right.
I don't play as much VR as I would like, but that is my ultimate preference.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm very interested in VR, but I haven't. We kind of talked about that in the last episode. Like I haven't pulled the trigger because they're all the headsets are like so expensive, and another thing that kind of bugs me about VR too is that the different headsets have different like exclusives, so there's no like one place to like play everything, and that irritates me. Like if there was like
So
one go to, like I feel like I would be more likely to jump in.
if you can get a MetaQuest 2, I think that's a pretty, I have felt like I've gotten a great amount of value out of mine.
Okay,
Um,
which isn't the newest
I,
because they have a three.
no, right. I haven't bought the 3, so I can't endorse it.
Okay.
I really want one actually, but I just haven't been able to justify. I don't play enough anymore to justify dropping, what is it, $600, $500
Oh,
for
I
one.
know.
Multiple hundreds of dollars for a new system. Um,
Yeah.
but if I did get a new VR headset, it would be that one. Well,
Okay.
it's not like I have a whole lot of other options because I've got the VR2 already.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I feel like you're right. I feel like if I did get one, it would probably would be that one. But it is hard to just justify it for the cost when there's so many other games that you can play not on VR. Some old cheap games that you could probably get for like 2 cents these days, like your number eight, if you want to go into that.
Yes, number 8, Fable.
Fable. So this is definitely your Xbox fandom coming in here, and this because of like it's like the opposite for me. Where being a PlayStation guy, this was a series that I missed, which is a shame because I feel like based on everything I know about this, that I would really get into this because it's like the way that it feels on the outside looking in is it feels like a very like a more fantasy version of kind of what the system was when we played Knights of the Old Republic with the Star Wars license. So tell me, is first of all, is that correct? And other than that, what makes Fable so good?
It is not as complicated as the KOTOR series. It's a
Okay.
whole lot more controller friendly. Although I will admit, this is a game that I later on got on PC, Fable:
Okay.
The Lost Chapters, and I enjoyed it more as a PC game than as an Xbox game. But I beat it as a kid at Brian's house.
Oh,
Um,
oh my.
and we had a lot of fun playing this game. It's just a really well done RPG. The way the skills are done is that you can kind of just be a brute about it. I think the first time I beat it, I was, and then in subsequent playthroughs, I got a little more complicated with it. Like there is a spell where you dash behind your enemies, for example, and I started utilizing that a lot more, dashing around to kill people. Um, and really, there are a lot of spells, but I can't remember any others that are particularly like, ooh, flashy. Wow. Actually, I guess there is one where later on in the game, you can like, if you're evil, you can summon this like hellish portal of fire, basically, to incinerate your enemies around you, and
Okay.
that's pretty
That
sweet.
sounds cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, especially for the time.
Yeah, that's a good point because
Because let's
this
see,
is an
when did this come
OG
out?
Xbox. It's like probably 04, 05 at the latest, just because this is an
Oh man,
OG Xbox game. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to point that out too because you note the difference between the exclusives that the Xbox had back then compared to now. Like they definitely didn't have like the quantity over the PS2, but they did have some quality stuff for sure. When you combine like this and like the Knights of the Old Republic series, they had Halo, obviously. And that's all just on that original Xbox as well. So, they were cooking pretty good back then in the start. I don't know what their deal is these days.
Yeah, we've had three, if I'm not mistaken, Xbox exclusives on my list and no Sony exclusives.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, see, that's a big departure between. Although I do think there is going to be some some looking ahead. I think there's going to be some Sony exclusives coming up, one in particular. But yeah, for Fable also, I was curious. Well, okay, I got a couple questions on Fable because this is a game that I'm very interested in but haven't played. Is is the structure how is the structure of the game? Like, is it similar to Knights of the Old Republic where you go into an area and it's not really open, but it's open to a degree, but you just kind of move through it and like do the different quests and stuff there, and then you move on to like another area? Or what is it like in terms of the gameplay?
So there are quests within the different areas, but you're in a guild.
Okay.
It starts off you're a young boy and your village is burnt to the ground around
Of
you.
course.
And you are rescued by the guild and raised as a hero. And from there, you basically decide if you're going to be a hero or if you're going to be an evil, terrible person.
Okay.
Which morality systems at the time were not common.
Right. That's why I was kind of
So
bringing
that
up the
was,
Republic comparison.
yeah, yeah. I had not thought of it anymore, but I think it's a pretty good one. RPGs of the time that had morality systems and were really Fable is not as deep as KOTOR. I don't think I could have handled KOTOR at the age that I beat Fable because Fable is a whole lot of just swinging your sword around.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's real time instead of being turn-based or where you can freeze time to enter your
Yeah.
skills.
Got it. That makes
And the story I would not say is exactly its super strong suit because it's really a whole lot of cliches, but I enjoy it. It brought me joy as a kid, and honestly, I was thinking earlier today, as I was thinking about this podcast, that I may beat Fable again sometime not too far in the future.
Yeah, it sounds really fun. Basically any RPG where the choice element is front and center. Like, I'm into that for sure. That instantly piques my interest. I'm curious about Fable 1 versus the other two games of the series because there were two after that on the 360. And it's interesting because like I feel like I could be wrong here, but it seems like by the third one, like I don't know if the general reception was as high as it was for that first one, but have you played them all, and why one
Oh yeah.
over the newer ones?
Nostalgia.
Yeah.
Both two and three are great, but I've beaten one like way more times than either of the other two combined, and I've beaten the other two multiple times each. I prefer three over two.
Interesting.
Controversial opinion, I think.
Yeah.
But three, I think did a lot of things really well. It's not exactly the thinking man's game, in my opinion, just to be
Okay.
perfectly honest. Because they made it to where your weapon adapts to how you play. And so if you really want to just be hack and slash Neanderthal about it, they adapt for you. And I was like, great, cool. I can use spells if I feel like it, but I never really invested that much into them, so they weren't that good. So I mostly just hack and slash my way through it, collected some gold, and tried to. Fable 3 has a lot more choices to
Awesome.
it than the others do because you become king
Right.
halfway through the
That
game.
sounds awesome.
Yes, I thought that was a brilliant mechanic.
Yeah.
So it is like mostly nostalgia that puts Fable on this list and neither of those other two on here.
Well, I hear you on that, but at the same time, you do kind of have to give it some credit for being not only the first in the series, but like you said, like the RPGs that were very choice based was pretty rare at the time, and you can see where the industry is now compared to where it was then. Like they were obviously onto something. It's like, you
Right.
look at your Baldur's Gate 3, like we were talking about more recently. Like, it's that's like considered one of the greatest games of all time now. And like, Fable, I think probably when it came out, maybe even then it wasn't probably held to the same degree that maybe your Baldur's Gate 3 is. But just that idea of choice-based RPG gameplay, like that is, I feel like, kind of what has been one of the biggest driving forces for that genre since Fable. So you got to give it some credit there.
Yeah. I think it was more of an innovator than it gets credit for because people, what they really point out is how the creator, if I remember right, his name is Peter Molyneux.
Yeah, that's
Is that
right.
his name?
Yeah.
He promised a lot that he did not deliver on. If I remember correctly,
Yes.
there was an event where he said you can plant a seed and watch it grow into a tree or something like that, and that never came into fruition.
Okay.
But there was a lot to it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's fair. I have heard about that. But for me, if I was going to go back and play this, which I do think that I will one of these days, going back and play the Fable series because I'm very interested in it. I don't think I would have those high expectations really because like I recognize that it's a freaking original Xbox game. Like I love Star Wars Knights,
yeah.
like, but it's got its limitations as well. So, yeah, I
Oh,
don't think
absolutely.
that I would have that issue. So, but yeah, it does sound like a super fun game to go back through. Unlike the other two that we've discussed, not intimidating at all. It's just a
No.
matter of making the time for it. And I will say it's a little bit more top of mind for me and probably some other people lately because there is a new Fable game that is coming out at some point. I mean, they haven't done a release
Oh,
date
yeah.
for it, but
When I Googled Fable release date, the Fable 4 release was what it came up and said 2025. So apparently
okay,
that's something to look forward to next year.
yeah.
I didn't look any farther into it because we were in the middle of talking, but that's apparently coming down the pipeline next year.
Yeah, that'll be one to watch for sure. I'll be checking out and like if it that a lot of times when a new game is coming out that will get me to go back and play the older ones. I was thinking about that earlier with because there's this new Dragon Age. I get it mixed up with Dragon Age versus Dragon Quest. New Dragon Age game, which is the BioWare RPG series. So
Right.
I'm interested in but I would want to go back and play the older ones first. But yeah, that the new Fable on the horizon does make me more interested in going back and checking those out. So maybe I'll have to do that.
Yeah. And that reminds me, I actually have Inquisition downloaded on my PlayStation right now that I
Oh,
need to play through. Dragon Age game. Who knows? Maybe had I already played that game, it could be on the top of the list, but
well, maybe so. You never
we'll
know.
never know.
That was another one that Brett liked, so it's good. It's got a good track record for you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Good sign. So number 7 is StarCraft II.
Okay, StarCraft 2. So we're back in the intimidating column. At least I can at least I can kind of wrap my head around this one a little bit. But yeah, obviously we dabbled in Age of Empires, like I mentioned. I've played fairly extensively the Halo Wars games, which I know is kind of like a baby version of StarCraft 2. But what is it like? Tell me about like your history of the RTS and like is this the peak of that genre?
My history of RTS started with the game Command and Conquer when I was a
Okay,
small child, and I did not know what the fuck was going on, so I
sure.
barely played at all and then gave up. But then I had StarCraft when I was, oh, about actually similar time to Guns the Duel era when I was a middle schooler.
Okay,
I think I was maybe like a fifth or sixth grader playing the original StarCraft. And when I knew that StarCraft II was coming out well in advance. I believe it was 2011 when it dropped. And so I had been familiar with the series for about 5, 6 years at that point, if I'm doing the math right.
okay.
And I was super hyped for it, and then it was just everything that it was supposed to be when it came out. I loved the campaign. And over the years, I've enjoyed both of the expansions that have come out. But really, the thing about it that I enjoy more than playing it is watching it. It is
Interesting.
my favorite esport of all time, I would say, that I come in and out of frequently. I used to watch it like religiously, like a football fan, such that I remember one time when we were in college, I was hanging out like drinking beer, cheering for my favorite player because he was in the World Finals and was like, "Yeah, this is entertainment right here."
Wow. I think I remember you talking to Du Hyun about it one time too.
Oh, that's awesome. I couldn't remember if he was into StarCraft or not. I didn't want to just assume because he was Korean he was,
Right,
but
right. That's like that's the thing that I remember like when we were in college, I remember I don't think I even really was aware of like the campaign aspect of it. What I knew about StarCraft was, oh yeah, it's that complicated ass PC game that all the South Koreans play and are really good at.
yes. Nowadays, the crazy thing is things have come far enough that two Europeans are the best at the
Oh,
game now. A Frenchman and where is Cyril from? A Finnish player.
okay. It only took a decade for him to catch up.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's a very recent development. There was this guy. There's this player named Maru who has been in it since he was like a 13-year-old, and that was when I first started watching. Was when Maru was like 13, and he was already dominating the scene. And now he's like 24, 25, and is just now not dominating the scene anymore because this Frenchman and this Finnish guy are so good.
It's really crazy because I remember, I've never really gotten into watching esports or anything like that, but I remember, there's a period where my brother and Brett to a degree too, but especially my brother was like really into the competitive Smash Bros scene,
Hmm.
and like there was this documentary made, very amateur, about like the original really great Smash Bros players or whatever, and they're all just kids, and we're talking about Melee here, and like but like it seems like even compared to like actual sports, like with like physical there where like with bodily contact, um it's crazy how like quickly they age out of esports. It seems like the
Oh yeah.
hit at certain like even like you're like mid-20s, it's like, oh, it's over, right? Like that is so wild to me. Like that is very competitive scene for sure.
There was a player of another certain game on the list
Oh.
that I remember seeing an article about him being 28 and in esports, and it being like, how are you still doing it when you're so fucking old as a
Yeah.
28-year-old? And
It's
as a
like,
31-year-old, that's like,
yeah.
oh man, come on now.
Yeah, I know it's brutal. Like and even like I've been a lot more last couple seasons I've been a lot more into the NFL than I ever have been before. And you got like Aaron Rodgers playing for the Jets still, and he's like, he's not like doing great, but like he just won his game on Thursday, and he's like what? He's got to be in his 40s by now. Uh
Surely.
and I mean he looks ancient compared to like all the other players, but like you would never see a 40-year-old like in the competitive mix on like a StarCraft II or whatever.
The crazy thing, so the aforementioned Frenchman is like an 18-year-old, but in the original StarCraft scene, because I watched StarCraft Brood War remake, um, all the people that were on that in like 98 are a lot of the same people that are on it now. So that's
Oh.
a much older crowd, and somehow they still have actions per minute in the like three and four hundreds.
Oh my God. Yeah, the actions per minute thing, that's insane. Now, talking a lot about the competitive aspect of this game, is that something that I mean, obviously you weren't like going for any tournaments or anything, but did you get into that when you were playing StarCraft 2, like playing online against people?
I was a little afraid of it, so I played on the first expansion, Heart of the Swarm. I played about 10 competitive matches, and no, I played about 18 competitive matches. I had to play 10 just to get my rank, and then I played about eight more after that, and I was in Gold League. And I was very, very proud of that because I've never played a competitive game like that outside of StarCraft II, where I really got into the rank. So gold is not anything special, but it was very special to me. And then a few years later, I went back and I placed silver, which was much more disappointing by comparison, but still. not bronze at least.
Well, at least they give you like that aspect of it, like there's like the different tiers because you wouldn't want to be just a newcomer going up against those fucking gods at it.
Oh no, not at all.
Yeah.
Which when I played the original StarCraft as a kid, I did not play like the normal game against anyone. I only played like custom maps where you'd be in like an RPG basically in the game. I'm trying to think of some of the examples of games that I played. Like there was one where you were a unit called a ghost and you were killing zombies and it was like a Resident Evil thing
Oh,
was the name of the map. That was someone's
that's cool.
custom map that they made. And there were tower defenses, though I don't think I played any of the tower defenses as a kid, but there's a format that this is more of a thing from Warcraft 3 than from Starcraft 2,
Mm.
but they have some of it in Starcraft 2. It's called a Maul, M-A-U-double, or not M-A-U-W, Jesus Christ, M-A-U-L.
Okay.
And it's like a tower defense where you just have an open lane and you can place your towers instead of them being on a set path where you're just killing stuff from the sides, you can create a maze that the enemies have to go through.
Okay.
And I've spent a lot of time playing those because the maze building is very fun to me.
Yeah.
And so it's those things about StarCraft 2 that make it special as well. Not
Yeah,
only the
like
gameplay, but the arcade mode.
sure. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of different things that you could do with it, which is really cool. I think the thing that makes me the most interested in it is being like I said, like still pretty rudimentary in terms of my RTS experience. And to be honest, we talked last time when you were on the Disgaea entry. Like I'm more interested in the turn-based strategy stuff, I think, like your XComs or
Mm.
your obviously Final Fantasy Tactics and things like that. But I still like what I play with RTS. I'll be honest, I didn't really get super into Halo 1. I thought it was okay, but Halo 2 I liked quite a bit. And obviously we played through that on the channel.
Hmm.
So what I would be the most interested in coming in to if I was going to try out StarCraft would be the campaign, which I've heard is like really, really great for
It
both
is.
StarCraft 1 and 2. So like what is it about that? Like it's just like they hit you with a lot of good variety in terms of your objectives, or does it have like a good story, or what makes it like a good RTS campaign?
Both. The story is not like, well, actually, no, I don't know. It's pretty great.
Really?
It's not like the most, unique, unpredictable, oh, I never saw this coming type storytelling, but there are some twists and turns throughout, and you get attached to the characters, because they, have epic cutscenes where they do cool things. And it's typical sci-fi stuff. You've got your primitive alien race, your higher alien race with the Protoss, and then your humanoid, well, your human race with the Terrans.
Yeah.
And
And it's kind of like is it like a war between like three sides, basically?
yes.
Okay.
And also a whole lot of every campaign, you're not only fighting against the other sides, but fighting against your own people in various missions.
Oh, okay.
There's always some mirror matchup reasoning. Like in the original StarCraft II campaign, you're playing as Jim Raynor, who is a rebel against um, this enemy named Emperor Minsk, who came to power during the original StarCraft.
Okay.
And so you end up fighting Terrans almost equally as much as you fight the Zerg and the Protoss.
Got it. Got it. Okay, very interesting. I guess my last question just for me, as a newcomer, relative newcomer to RTS, like what do you think I would you knowing me, like what do you think what would you recommend for me more? Would it be StarCraft or would it be Age of Empires?
Oh, it would be StarCraft. Age of
Okay.
Empires is honestly, I've tried to do more than the opening campaign, and I haven't gotten any farther than that because you have to do so much like wall breaking and strategic
Mm,
preparation for everything. With StarCraft 2, you have to break through sieges of units like defending the bases, but it's nothing like having to tear down a wall while you're getting gunned down by the enemy forces.
sure. Yeah. I really liked what we played of Age of Empires, and I do think I might like that setting and atmosphere a little bit more than the sci-fi stuff. But yeah, you don't hear I definitely don't hear like Age of Empire campaigns held up in the same breath as like the Starcraft II campaign I hear is like really great. So um
If you want StarCraft 2 but fantasy, I would recommend playing Warcraft 3. But the thing is, Warcraft Reforged has like one of the worst reputations of any
yeah, I've
game in
heard
all of
about that.
history.
That's a shame.
So I've never given it a chance.
And that's like the only way to play it now?
Yeah, unless you just already had it and you didn't buy the new one. If you bought the new one, even though you already had the old one, you can't play the old one anymore. But I am like, I've got to be like a unicorn because I have the old one and never bought the new one, so I can still play it.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah, that's a shame because I remember hearing about that too. Like the Warcraft 3 Reforged was kind of a disaster. I don't know why they Blizzard in their freaking practices of replacing their old games, which maybe we'll get into later on. But for now, number 6.
Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal.
Okay, now I want to bring to light a very interesting fact here. This is the first game on your list that is also on my list.
Oh,
So
wow.
people who
And
what was that?
if I'm not mistaken, it's the last.
No,
Or is there one more? No, there's one more actually.
it was red and blue that was last on my list. I think gold and silver it wasn't much higher than that. It was like maybe 20 or something like that. It was 21 and 20. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, so people obviously I kind of broke down why I loved it so much in that when I talked about it on my list, but it is definitely very important game for me in terms of just like getting me into video games as a whole. So curious about like with you, like how young were you whenever you played this, and how important was it for you, like just getting into games as a whole?
I was a first grader and I
Yeah,
was very
perfect.
much into games already.
Okay,
But I had seen all the hype for Golden. I don't know how actually, because it's not like I was reading gaming magazines. I guess they had commercials for it
oh
on
definitely.
Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon or whatever. Because and I was already actually, I mentioned, I believe, the Yu-Gi-Oh! League at Books A Million in the last episode. When I was a 5-year-old, I started going to the Pokemon League at Books A
Okay,
Million. So I was already playing with like adults as a 5 and 6 year old,
and this is in red and blue.
and uh, at, yes, I was mainly just trading with people, and then when Gold and Silver came out, I started battling people.
Nice.
They had an Elite Four at the Pokemon League, and I very briefly was in it as a
That
little
is
6 or 7 year
an awesome
old.
idea. That is very cool.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. It was very flattering to me to have had that opportunity.
Damn, that sounds
Um,
great.
yeah, that was actually just to talk about the Pokemon trading card game at the time. That was a very special time in
Yeah.
gaming. They had badges where you would basically, after every duel you had with somebody or every battle, whatever, you would stamp your book with the supervisor of the league.
Wow.
And once you had enough stamps, you would get two for a win, one for a loss. And you would get an actual badge once you had gotten enough stamps. And so some people had all 8 badges. I believe I got 5 when I was a little kid.
Nice.
And it was a very special part of my childhood.
Yeah,
And
I think
Pokemon
it's
Gold
it's
and
kind of
Silver was
hard.
a large part of that Pokemon League experience.
Sure, sure. I think it like I didn't have a league or anything like that, but Pokemon was so big in my school. Just mostly the games, to be honest, like not so much the cards, but the like everybody played the games. Like all like it was so obviously the most popular thing in the school. And I think it might be kind of hard for if you weren't there for it, I don't know if you can like fully get like how pervasive it was. Like it was such a big deal. Like it's probably like how similar to how like kids play Fortnite today or whatever. Like it's just everybody did,
Yeah,
you know.
it was the Roblox of its era.
Definitely, definitely. I'm assuming you were a gold man.
I got I got gold and silver at the same time.
Oh, did you really? That's fun.
Yes,
I
got them
had
both
gold
for
first.
Christmas.
I definitely had gold first, but I did ultimately get silver as well. Did you ever get into crystal?
Yes.
Okay.
I specifically remember one time I was playing Crystal and I had my Game Boy with me in Walmart and I set it down and I
Oh
turned
no.
around and then it was gone forever.
Oh my God. That's a nightmare.
And I had like just caught Suicune too.
Of course.
So I
Yeah,
lost not only my Game Boy, my Crystal, but also my Suicune with it.
that is tragic. Do you have a favorite Pokemon?
Yeah, it's not creative or cool. My favorite Pokemon is Charizard.
Oh, okay. I was gonna go out on a limb and I was like, if Sean has a favorite Pokemon, I was gonna get Totodile and that line for alligator.
I would say that's my second favorite is Totodile.
You were such an advocate for him in our Nuzlocke, and I was always trying to tear him down. I don't even know why I was like I had this thing against against alligator, but I was
The
like such a
vendetta
hater on
against the Totodile line.
him.
But
I
he proved his worth by
He
the
did.
end.
He was with us to the end. I that was like when I look back, I do want to. I mentioned probably in the last episode, but I do want to do a podcast episode where we kind of look back on some of our favorite memories and just like kind of tell the history a little bit of Wildfire gaming. But for sure, that Pokemon Gold Nuzlocke, that's huge up there. Like every single time we
Oh
had
yeah.
listened to that, it was like so fun and like I think realistically, I think the most fun to go for me to go back and watch probably is the wrestling stuff because it's just so ridiculously over the top and funny. But
Yeah.
the Gold Nuzlocke also though is like if in terms of a series to just like have on, it's tough to beat. Like we had some good stuff, and there's like so many funny like tangents where you go on. Like I had the whole thing where I was shit talking the whole writing center or whatever.
Yes. Several episode saga of it.
Yeah, and then like there was like these, it being a Nuzlocke obviously added like the tension and stuff that was so fun. And like I remember we had like kind of a disaster. We went into that what's her
The
name?
Whitney
Whitney.
fight.
Yeah, we went into that like so confident because we had Geodude and we were like, there's no way that she's gonna be able to stand against us, and it just like all falls
And
apart.
she just stomped everything. We were like, this is shit. Everything is shit.
Yeah,
We
and
were so like sad and lonely at the time, it seemed, but having such a fun time doing the Let's Plays, at
yeah,
least.
I know. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I like looking back on like that time period in my life. I was like, there were things that I was sad about in my life, but there was also we were also having just like so much fun. Whenever we were doing our
Yeah.
and I was running the paper and stuff too. That was a lot of fun. So yeah. Anyway, definitely one of the best series that we did. One of my favorite memories, which I don't know if it actually made it into either of the highlight reels that we did, but there's that moment. I think it's like because we would go through these times where we hadn't played in a long time, and so like we'd come back and we would just like have completely forgotten what was going on and like what was in our team even and stuff like that. And like I'm going
Yeah.
this, and we come back and we're like, man, let's go check the daycare and see if we got anything in there. We go in there and there's like this, back in those days, like you couldn't identify what a Pokemon was without clicking on it because they just had like their kind of generic sprites. And we were like,
I
what is
think
this
I
thing?
remember this
Click on it, and it's shit.
shit.
And we just had no idea. And what's funny is like if you go back and look at that video, we don't even check to see what it is. We're just like, well, whatever, we're not using that. And we just move on. And so that was
Oh man. What?
oh, man. Yeah, so lots of memories. And remember when we started that series, I hadn't beaten gold yet at that time.
Really?
I
I
think
did not remember that.
yeah, I think by the time that we finished it, I had. But yeah, when I was a kid, Um, I this was like I said, this was my first Pokemon game, but I notoriously didn't finish them because they are pretty long, especially for a kid. But
Oh yeah.
um, I was gonna finish gold for sure. Like I was, had 7 badges. I either had gotten through or I was trying to get through the ice cave, which I always did have trouble with as a kid. Um, and Brett, we were very young, and I let Brett play, which was a huge mistake, unsupervised. And he released like all of my Pokemon.
Oh, someone did that to me with Pokemon Emerald, but it was
Really?
as revenge because I accidentally I started a new game of Pokemon Stadium on their Nintendo 64, not knowing that it was going to erase their game.
Oh,
And so years later, they got me back by releasing all of my Pokemon in Emerald,
oh,
which
okay.
I felt was kind of a dick move because I did mine accidentally and they did
Yeah,
theirs on purpose. But
yeah. Well, to be fair to Brett, I don't, he was like just a very young kid. I don't think he knew what he was doing. But I think his idea was that he was like he was releasing them from their Pokeball so that they could come like fight with him or whatever. But in fact, he
okay.
was releasing them into the wild, and that basically completely eliminated that playthrough. And we had a curse on that game that I did not finish for many years later. It was, like I said, it was somewhere in the period of us graduating from college, like around in there, where I finally saw it through.
Man.
And it is sad. I am sad to report that our file no longer exists because of the old, that eventually like those old cartridges, particularly with gold and silver, would just like the battery would give out. Um,
Oh, it's just a completely dead cartridge now?
yeah, and then it's just a completely dead cartridge. But
Oh man.
which actually was the case when we played it. But I had Brand and my brother like replace the battery, and so that was why we were able to do that because it was dead before that playthrough too. And
Wow.
then now, and then that battery has since died, and I think he actually has gone back and replaced it again. So now we can do it again. But like, it's just, yeah, that's the thing about those. So now these days, whenever I go back and play those games, I actually have them on my 2DS, and because you could buy them on the, which you can't do it anymore because they've completely shut down the storefront on the those systems are sold. But at the time you could buy
Mhm.
digital copies, and so obviously they don't have that problem. And so if I ever go back and play them, like I do it that way these days. But still, I mean, I love those games dearly. Like I do put in my list. I have Sun and Moon above it, but Gold and Silver obviously like extremely special. I can see why they are your top games. Is there anything in particular other than like these were the ones that we played as kids that puts it at the top of your Pokemon hierarchy?
The fact that the Johto and the Kanto
Yeah,
regions are in it.
it's just tough to beat.
When I thought that I had beaten the game and then there was basically a whole other game left to go, my little childhood heart sang.
Yeah,
Um,
and they've never done that
and
before.
yeah, yeah, I had no idea that it was coming. And I think that was a huge part of what made it so big to me. But also, I'm gonna be honest, our playthrough is part of why
Sure.
it is on the list. I have nostalgia for that as well because that's been, like 8, 9, or 7, 8 years ago now.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about. I think that definitely has some bearing on it being on my list as well. Definitely the fact that it was the first because like for you, your first Pokemon games were Red and Blue, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but for me, I actually played Gold and Silver first and then went back to Red and Blue. So
Mm.
that obviously makes it very special for me as well. And then the first time that I actually completed the Pokédex, it was in the Gen 4 versions of Gold and Silver, so Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And I completed the Gen 4 Pokédex, like all of them, like so everything that was out at that time. So it was like 400 something, 490 something Pokemon, I think, all in one save, which was on Heart Gold. So that also I kind of just lump those in since it's just a remake of the same game basically. But yeah, all of that and more. Like I just think Gold and Silver still, it's a definitely respectable game to have on the top, and just having both of those regions in the same game was crazy.
Yeah. Revolutionary. Can you imagine? This would maybe be a bit much. They would maybe need to make an MMO for this to make any sense. But if they had one where they went through all the regions
Oh my
now,
gosh. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it would have to be kind of an online focus because like your team would be long past level 100 if you actually went through all of them like in the traditional style. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, like
having a continuous world where you could go to all the regions, especially like in a today's environment where they were all like in a modern setting, like 3D and all that, and like seeing even just like seeing like because like those early regions, like the Gen 1 region, the Gen 2 region. I mean, like Ruby and Sapphire, like they did that one on the 3DS, so you could see it a little bit more realized. But those first couple, like we've never seen them like in like a modern setting, so that would be awesome to just like
yeah,
have an updated version of Johto.
that'd be very cool.
Yeah.
All right, Game Freak, I know you're listening. Get on
Yeah, right. They're worthless. They
it.
do it the same fucking formula they've had since the 90s.
Yeah, yeah, shame. But oh well. Number five. Um, Trying to think of some kind of tagline to go with this. My most recommended game for you of my
Yes,
entire top, actually.
no
Final
question.
Fantasy X.
It is insane, honestly, that I have not played Final Fantasy X, and it's in terms of like my list of like games that I need to play. Literally, I think Final Fantasy Tactics might beat it out, but other than that, it's literally like honestly it's Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy X, and what you have at number 4 on your list, which I won't spoil. But like those are like the top games that it's like I need to play these, and it's insane that I have not played these. Just to catch everybody up in terms of Final Fantasy, the ones I have played. 4, 6, 7, Crisis Core, which was a prequel to 7, 8, 9, 15, 16, 7 Remake, and now most of 7 Rebirth. And I have started 10 to be fair. But this was like back in the early, like back whenever I had a PlayStation 2, I would buy, you know how it was. You would get games and have like no idea what they were, how good they like you would have we just had no concept of what this game was or how good it was. Like it could be like a gift, it could be you could go into a store and find like a cheap copy and just be going based on the freaking what it looks like on the cover.
Just on the box, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like this is just, I feel like people don't do that as much today, but back in the day, this is how, like, I swear to God, like at least half of my library was built. Um,
Yeah.
and Final Fantasy 12 actually was the first game in the series I got through that method.
Oh.
And as a kid, my mind was not ready for Final Fantasy 12. Even today,
It's
I
a
feel like,
little much.
yeah, even today I feel like it's one of the more complicated ones in the mainline series, not counting the MMOs. But then I did get 10 after that, and I did get a little bit further into 10 for sure because it is more simple than 12. But yeah, not super far into it, and so I everybody talks about how it's one of the best in the series. But for you, as like a huge fan of Final Fantasy X specifically, more so than the rest of the series, what is so great about it? What am I missing out on having not played 10?
All right. The flow of combat is to me more smooth than perhaps any other turn-based RPG I've ever played. In fact, it's mm, one other maybe that I prefer the combat in that we may hear about. Um, and the way that you can switch between the characters during combat, it's been done since, but it's just so perfect. You know exactly, okay, I have this enemy, I need to do this.
Hmm.
But also you can say, fuck that, I am going to do this instead and switch it up a little bit. Especially there's a character named Kimari who kind of doesn't exactly fit the mold of any one character, and you can take him along the path of any of their sphere grids.
Oh, cool.
And kind of he also steals skills from enemies. So like I've never
Oh,
used him, but it's just an example of like you have some options for how you beat the game.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Like
Um,
other Final Fantasies have had that where I mean it's a little bit different obviously because they don't have the sphere grid, but like that's kind of a thing in Final Fantasies where there'll be a character that can learn enemy skills and then use them, which is it's like a lot of work to like build them up. So a lot of times they don't get used, but if you do invest in them, they can be really cool and fun.
yeah, like a Dragoon class, I think is usually what they are, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
Um, but and the story I think is really good. You got some twists to it that I will not spoil because I want you to experience for yourself, unless you already know, in which
No,
case we can talk
believe
about
it or
it.
not, I really don't know a lot of the story of it, which is beautiful. Like that, I haven't really had it spoiled. Like there's some, I feel like I know a little bit. I know that like Tidus's dad is like I don't know if he's the main villain, but he's definitely on the opposite end of what you're trying to accomplish there.
Uh,
But other than that, like I don't know a lot. I think like you're kind of on what are you on like kind of a pilgrimage or something like that for Yuna or
yep.
whatever. But yeah, I mean that's about it. Like I really don't know much.
You know the most important details, frankly.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. You're on a pilgrimage for Yuna. And Tidus's dad, he's a character.
I'm excited.
You have some other villains that are very good.
They got like all the
Specifically
water
one named
stuff.
Seymour.
Oh, okay. I just remember at the beginning, like there's like a gigantic tidal wave taking over the city you're in or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, gets smashed. And yeah. I really think that you should play that one more than
Oh,
any other game on the list. I think that should be at the top of your to-do list
yeah,
of gaming.
I don't think there's any question. Now, when you played this, was it at the time or was it like a little bit after the fact when you came into 10?
I didn't beat it at the time. I beat it when it was re-released for PS. No, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I did beat it before it was re-released for PS4. When did I actually beat
Well, there
Final
was also
Fantasy
a PS3
X?
version that you could have played.
I didn't never have a
Oh,
PS3.
that's right.
I my first playthrough I did not beat. I got to a boss fight that I just could not best. But then the next playthrough I did, I was much stronger and I easily beat it. And I believe that was still on PS2. I think I was in high school when I beat it. And it's one of the only like major RPGs that I've actually beaten,
Yeah,
which
that's
I think says a lot about it. I don't really beat video games. I'm very bad about not beating video games. That's why so many of these, just for the fact that, like Fable, for example, made the list just because it's good enough that I've beaten it multiple times. I don't usually beat RPGs. And 10 is one that I've enjoyed enough to play through multiple times as I beat it when it was re-released. And then again, when Taryn and I got together, we played it together.
Oh, nice.
And I think that also gives it a very special place on the list because she liked it too.
Yeah, yeah, that's always really special. Like I do the same thing with Reagan when she really gets into a game. Like that's probably part of why Heavy Rain is so high on my list because that was the first one that we played together. Although
Mm.
I've showed that to many people and they've all like I don't know, it's just like totally works as a show people this game. But yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely it like I said, it's insane that I haven't played it. What if when talking about the combat a little bit, like do you have because I know that the turn-based system in this one was a little bit different. I think even a little bit simpler than even some of the earlier Final Fantasies. Because Final Fantasies, like I think maybe four was the first one where they kind of had it was turn-based, but it was like the meters would fill up slowly, and then like you could do a move. So it wasn't like a pure turn-based system. It was like based on the meters. I can't remember what they call it, like active time battle or something like that system. But 10 is not like that from what I understand. It's like a pure turn-based system, right?
It is pure turn-based. You can, in fact, see on the right side of your
The turn
screen the
order.
order that's going to come. Yes.
I was gonna ask about
Which,
that because my favorite so I haven't really gotten deep enough into the 10 combat to really be able to judge how much I like it. But I mentioned in there were two games that were contenders on my in my top 25 that were my favorite turn-based combat. And one of them was Chained Echoes, which that one I don't think does give you the turn order, but there's like other meters and stuff that you're paying attention to. Well, actually, no, it does. It definitely does give you the turn order. So that one gives you the turn order, and then the Octopath Traveler series also gives you the turn order. And so like knowing the turn order and then like you said, kind of being able to like that, it's like so
right.
great.
Yes. Yeah, because it really lets you know, like, all right, it's another layer of strategy. Not having to leave it up to luck of your speed stat, whether or not you're going to go next. I mean, it's still up to the speed stat, but in older games, it seemed like, I mean, heck, for Pokemon Gold and Silver, for example, like you don't know the enemy's speed stat when you're going
Right.
into it. This is kind of like a look into that. And being able to switch out characters in the middle of combat
Yeah.
at any given point, I think is another really good feature of the game.
Yeah, that's awesome. Chained Echoes, you could do that as well. Yeah, so if you're ever looking for a turn-based RPG to get into, you might like Chained Echoes. It has both of these things that you like about in this game.
That's
Um,
what it sounds like.
yeah, but so in terms of I'm just curious, just kind of gauging your history with the Final Fantasy series. Like what other ones have you played and is 10 the only one you've actually finished?
10, I hate to admit it. 10 is the only one I've actually finished. I've played 6, 7, 8, 12,
Okay,
14,
right. Well,
and 3.
three. That's interesting.
Yes, on the DS.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that version. So you've dabbled in the other series, but 10 is far and away your favorite.
Yes. The other ones, I just haven't been able to make myself beat them. 10 is the only one that has sucked me in and kept me in.
Well, they are
Yeah.
huge marathons to complete, so I can't fault you too much there. But yeah, 10, I gotta like we keep going back to it, but it's definitely one of the ones that I've got to play the most. I guess the last thing that I want to say about 10 is that it really is crazy that this was like a year one PS2 game, basically. Like the PS2 came out at like the end of 2000. In 2001, Final Fantasy 10 came out. And like looking at Final Fantasy 10 and comparing it to the Final Fantasies that we had, or even which the Final Fantasies on the PlayStation 1 looked great. So compare it to more to like just your average PS1 game and comparing it to the PS2, that is crazy how big of a generational leap that was visually. And I do not
Yeah.
think we will ever see anything like that again.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And what's funny is my first introduction to those Final Fantasy X characters was through Kingdom
Me
Hearts.
too. Me too. And that was another one where it just looked like an unbelievably good looking game compared to the games that we were used to basically at that time.
Yeah, just I remember the water graphics being just so like, wow to
Yeah. Oh,
me.
totally.
Speaking of,
Oh,
number four, Kingdom Hearts 2.
two. I
Yes.
I did not realize that. I thought it was going to be three.
Um, I have a love for Kingdom Hearts 3 that most don't seem to share. It's
Yeah.
very special to me. I was in quite a state when I started and finished the game. Um, I love that one. But Kingdom Hearts 2, I think I just enjoy more as a game in general.
Yeah.
So, right from the very start, I remember being a kid and waiting for the game to come out because I loved the original Kingdom Hearts so much.
Oh yeah.
And then when it dropped, the main thing that stands out to me is that part where you're Roxas and you can play the like bounce the ball game in the town square.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I spent a stupid amount of time just playing that game and trying to increase my high score in it.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, even though it's just a stupid little mini game.
Sure. Yeah.
And the game really, quite frankly, I wish I had played it more recently so I could remember it better why exactly it's that one that's so special to me. Because three is a lot more fresh in my mind.
Right.
But two, it holds just a higher place in my heart. I remember the ending being very epic, going into
Yes.
battle with Xemnas.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, teaming up with Riku for the final battle.
That's correct. Yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff in there.
Yeah, it's a very cool ending sequence. The whole game is very fresh, very cool to me. Um, if I had infinite time, I would have played it again and prep for this podcast so I could be like, yes, this is what I really remember about it. But it's kind of a nostalgia pick
Yeah.
for me.
Well, this is a series that's very special to me as well. I think part of it for me, if you look at my list, which is a little bit different than yours, which is interesting. My list, there definitely is stuff that I played in my younger years on there, but honestly, a lot of my list is stuff that I played either as a late teenager or even more so like kind of early 20s is where like a lot of the stuff that is on
Mm.
my list got where it is. And a lot of that was I did end up playing a lot of games after the fact because my mom was really strict about what I could play whenever I was, pretty young. But Kingdom Hearts didn't have that problem. And so Kingdom Hearts was one of those few series that I did play whenever it was coming out. And it was awesome. Like it just like being at that time and playing Kingdom Hearts, like Kingdom Hearts starting with Kingdom Hearts 1. And like you, I remembered the preview cycle for Kingdom Hearts 2 and immediately buying it whenever it was out. And it was like so awesome. And then like there was like the such a mind-blowing thing to start as Roxas because none of us had any idea who he was or like what the fuck was going
Yeah.
on. And like I think at the time, like over time, people have gotten frustrated with the Kingdom Hearts series, like not knowing what's going on, which I can understand. But like with Kingdom Hearts 1, it really wasn't that complicated. Like it's pretty straightforward what's going on. Yeah, I mean they have like their kind of esoteric stuff with like the darkness and all that. What Kingdom Hearts.
But you're looking for Kyrie. That's
But
the
yeah, you're
whole.
exactly right. You know exactly what's going on, and it's like, yeah, you're going to these different Disney worlds while you look for. It. Whereas like Kingdom Hearts 2, it starts off and you're a completely different character that they have not introduced whatsoever, and it's like, what is going on here? And that was. I also look back very fondly on that introduction where you're playing as Roxas. And obviously since then I've gone back and filled in like all the holes. I know exactly why he's there, who he is. But at the time, not knowing that stuff and just being very interested and like like how it's kind of broken up into days there at the beginning. And so like they're kind of hyping
Mhm.
you up through his dreams of like the return of Sora and like all the stuff that you know. It's very
Yeah.
cleverly done. Like true art, really. Like when you look back on like that intro in terms of what people knew and what they presented to you.
Yes. It's yeah. Very well put. It's beautifully done.
This is a series that is very important to me, being that I did play them back then, but I have kind of fallen off since then, and I haven't played three, and I really want to. Like I mentioned, that's very high on my list. Not quite, maybe quite as high as Final Fantasy 10, but like below it, like right below Final Fantasy 10 and Final Fantasy Tactics. It's like Kingdom Hearts 3. But I'm kind of going through the series slowly with Reagan because she's a huge Disney fan. And of course, now she's played some of the Final Fantasy games with me as well. And so she kind of has a lot of the pieces that she needs to become a Kingdom Hearts fan. And so we've played through the first one, and then we just kind of watched the cutscenes for the ones in between too. So that's your 358 over 2 days is the Roxas game. And then the one before that is like kind of like the in the between 1 and 2 for Sora, and it's I forget what it's called. It's like Chain of Memories or
Chain of
something.
Memories.
Yeah. So we kind of just looked up the stuff for that, but then we actually did start two, and we're kind of slowly working our way through two. So and then I do want to get through like the rest of the series and ultimately get to three. But I
Yeah.
yeah I'm I it's definitely a very special series for both of us. Fun fact, actually. This was the first game that I knew Sean liked because this is before we were roommates, but like early on when we were in that class with no one else, and I remember seeing you with a Kingdom Hearts shirt, and I was like, that guy seems cool.
Hell yeah.
Let me ask you this. Rank the components in terms of importance to you when it comes to Kingdom Hearts, which is Disney, Final Fantasy, and then just like the original cast and story. Like what is most important to you out of those three?
I'm gonna say original cast,
Yes.
Final Fantasy, Disney.
Yeah. I think that is my order as well. And it's funny because like at the time coming in, Disney was far and away number one for me. Like I grew up a huge Disney fan and like watched all the movies when I was a kid and all that. And it was a good time. Like when we were kids, Disney was popping off like you wouldn't believe. So like all that stuff, like I ate that stuff up for sure. Like even particularly before I was in the games, like that was like my biggest thing. And so coming in, like I remember seeing like the advertisements for Kingdom Hearts 1 on TV and like seeing Tarzan in particular, which was fairly new at the time. And just being like, "Holy crap, that looks amazing." And like that
Mhm.
was like the reason that I wanted the game. And now, I still love the Disney stuff, obviously. It's cool that it's in there. It's like batshit insane, really, when you think about it, like all the different shit that they put in there. But yeah, I agree. I think it's the original story that is what makes the series as special as it is.
Yeah, because there's really nothing like it. It becomes very confusing, but I think if you play all of them, that it does actually tie together and make
Yeah,
sense.
I
I
agree.
haven't even played all of them, and I could pretty much keep up with what was going on in three.
Yeah.
Even though, had I not watched an explainer video beforehand, I maybe could not have kept up with what was going on because
Sure.
I didn't finish Breath by Sleep. I didn't finish 358 by 2. Um, I barely played Chain of Memories, but I played 1 and 2 extensively.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Very special series, very special games.
yes. And number 3, we've talked about VR a lot, and here it comes, Resident
Sure.
Evil 4 VR.
Resident Evil. Now, is this is the old Resident Evil 4 VR or is this
The
the
old Resident
Okay.
Evil 4 VR.
Yeah. So
Oh man.
why is that? Like why the old one over the newer one?
The newer one is too hard. It's too scary.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I have it in VR too. I love it. It's a great game. I can't make myself play it because, damn it, it just is too intimidating, and I don't like being corded down when
Okay.
I'm trying to make a full like with the original for VR, I can play it on the MetaQuest 2 that has no wires.
Ah,
And
sure.
so I can just spin around and really keep up with my surroundings and whatnot in a completely different way. And it makes a difference. The not having a cord makes a
Oh,
huge
I could
difference.
I could see that for sure. Like having never even used it, like it seems like that would make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's my biggest complaint about the VR 2 by comparison. It's the reason that I still, when I am going to VR, I typically pick up my Quest 2 before I pick up my VR 2.
Interesting.
And Resident Evil 4 is a large part of that because, like, quite frankly, after talking about it, getting hype about it, I might go and play it later tonight.
Yeah. I mean, why
Um,
not? Well, talk to me about this because I know that you were a huge Resident Evil 4 fan, obviously before the VR version. So you want to like just talk about your history with Resident Evil 4 and then like what makes the VR version so special?
so I played the original Resident Evil 4 on PlayStation 2 when I was a child,
Perfect.
and I beat it on every difficulty. I unlocked every special weapon, and a former friend of mine, Chance, um, he saw a YouTube video in which if you beat the game with zero deaths saved, you get a special cutscene in which Ashley, the president's daughter, gets with Leon.
Oh, really?
Yes, that was not a real thing though. That was just something that somebody made up for a fucking YouTube video. So I watched Chance beat the game on hard with zero deaths. And he did not get the cutscene, and we were both dismayed
That's amazing.
because
That
it was
is
all for
classic
nothing.
early YouTube shenanigans right there.
Yes, classic early YouTube shenanigans indeed. But the VR version obviously came out much, much later. I didn't play it until what, the year before last? I already lived in
Wow.
the current home that I'm in, so maybe 20, it couldn't have been earlier than 21.
Okay.
Um, and it just, the way that it feels to get the weapons on your body, it's so reactive just right in a way that VR is not always.
Hmm.
When it's the perfect example of VR done correctly, in my opinion, because everything is so responsive. Your aim is guided by the laser, which is perfect because you don't have to be just a god of aim and figure out everything.
Right.
You have that guidance, but it's not
Yeah.
exactly easy either. Um, it's just the right amount of challenge, in my opinion. Um, the story of Resident Evil 4 is fun. Going through it, it's a great game by itself, and then you add the VR aspect, and that's what elevates it to number three.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Um,
I feel like it's like kind of a natural evolution too, because I know that there was a Wii version where obviously you kind of had the motion controls with the shooting or whatever, but obviously, it's taking a step further with the VR version. Did you ever play the Wii version?
no, I never had a
Okay.
Wii actually.
Oh, really? Wow. I guess I didn't know that. That's so interesting.
Yeah,
The 360
I
all up.
played friends Wii's, but I never had one. The main way that I got to play the Wii was hanging out with Brian.
Of course, the much vaunted Brian. Well, let me ask you this.
Yes.
Um, there's so many versions of Resident Evil 4 that people can play today. They can play like there's modern ports of the original. There's I mentioned the Wii version. There's the VR version of the old one. Then of course there's the remake and the VR version of the remake. So like for somebody that's new, that's interested in Resident Evil 4, what do you think is like the definitive version to play?
If somebody just told me you can only play one version for the rest of your life, I think the version I would pick would be OG Resident Evil 4 VR.
Wow. Okay.
I think I could get on that game anytime, anywhere, beat it, have a great time, play it for hours and hours. And then just start over and do it again. It's just God, the experience of playing a good VR game.
Mm,
There's really been no other VR experience except for Beat Saber that has been as smooth as Resident Evil 4 VR for me.
yeah,
And that's a large part of it. The smoothness of everything about it, like being able to, I don't know. I think being on the MetaQuest 2 is also a big advantage for it because of the wireless factor.
sure.
You can turn the camera with the joystick, but I much preferred I just stood in an open space where I just like turned my body physically when I needed to turn the camera.
Yeah, that sounds
And
cool.
that was a big part of it. The immersion factor.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Even just thinking about the fun of it gets the adrenaline pumping. I probably literally am going to go play after we get done doing this podcast.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Bloodborne too. Like just like the thought of playing it, I'm just like, holy shit, that sounds amazing. Like yeah, it's yeah, I mean you're kind of selling me on the MetaQuest. Like in fact, because just the idea of like not having to connect anything and it's just like ready to go by itself. I mean, that is pretty awesome.
Oh yeah.
Resident Evil 4 is I might have mentioned this earlier because well, first of all, it's kind of interesting to know that this entry is the only one on your list where it's two games that like the series has appeared more than once on your list because we had Resident Evil Village back at whatever number it was.
Oh yeah.
And now we have Resident Evil 4 VR. But yeah, so I mentioned earlier that 4 is the only one I've ever played. And I didn't get like super far into it. And it was again, it was like after the fact because there was no way this was a game that my mom was gonna let me play at the time. But um yeah, I definitely it's when I hear about Resident Evil, having really knowing nothing about the series, it seems like 4 is always the one that is kind of held up on a pedestal as the best. And then like whenever you mix in the VR aspect of it, we could just being a huge fan of VR and playing a game that is already that beloved, I can see how that would be a slam dunk.
Oh yeah. It's huge. And the thing that put Resident Evil 8 on the list is that it is such a great spiritual successor to Resident Evil 4, in my opinion. Resident Evil 5, also, I think a very underrated game that tried to be Resident Evil 4, but with co-op.
Mm, that's not
Um,
bad.
yeah, no, it's not a bad thing at all, but it was not unique enough to set itself apart in history, is the problem with it. But Resident Evil 4, great game to emulate. So moving on to number two, The Legend of Dragoon.
Oh, okay. The Legend of Dragoon. So, by the way, I did want to point out Final Fantasy X, PlayStation exclusive, Kingdom Hearts, PlayStation exclusive, and Legend of Dragoon, PlayStation exclusive. So now suddenly they're starting to rack up the points a little bit now after.
Oh, good observation. They're equal now, three
Yeah,
and three. But
but
I guess PlayStation higher on the list. So
yeah, but
who's the
older,
real winner
generally
here?
older PlayStation games though, more so than the new ones.
Oh, so double who's the winner here. It's an interesting equation to try to work out.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because this is a game that I had obviously I love JRPGs. A huge Final Fantasy fan. It's definitely my favorite genre. But it's a game that Legend of Dragoon is a game that I had not played until we finally started the series on our channel after we well, I mean to be fair, we did have that one last episode that was not published.
Oh
But
yeah.
back when we were tearing our class, I've always felt bad about that. So I'm glad that we could actually get it going for real on the channel. But it was really cool. It was really awesome to like, because this is a game that I'd heard you talk about for many years, and like finally being able to experience it, it was a very cool experience.
Yes, it was, I think, the first JRPG other than Pokemon Red that I like really got into. I think I was an 8-year-old when I played Legend of Dragoon for the first time.
Perfect. Yeah.
And it just the story really, I love dragons, and they are featured prominently in the story. I thought
Sure.
that was very cool. Getting to fight against dragons is very cool. Being a dragoon, I thought was very cool.
Mhm.
And it took me a long ass time to beat this game. I think when I finally beat it, I was, let's see, it was a very climactic completion of the game, anticlimactic completion of the
Oh,
game, for me. Because a friend of mine, I was in high school and I was being enticed to go to a party. And I was like, 1 second, I'm beating this game that I've been playing since I was an 8-year old. And my friend was like, nah, man, we gotta go. Our ride is here. But I was defeating the final boss. And so I like skipped over the dialogue. And that's
oh
part
no.
of why the re-release of this game is so special to me as an adult, because once I actually beat it, I will make sure to do so at a time when I have plenty of time to watch the final cutscene
Oh my gosh, so you beat
and
it, you still
absorb it.
haven't like really watched the ending.
Not truly. I haven't gotten to appreciate it. I know what the ending twists are,
Okay.
and there are some ending twists. There are some quote unquote twists that it's like, oh, I'm very surprised by that. Ooh.
Okay.
And then there are some that it's like, oh shit, that's actually surprising.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Um, so some actual twists and some should be twists, but they're so obvious that it's not really a twist at all.
Sure.
Um,
I kind of have seen a little bit of that already. Just not, obviously I'm nowhere near finished the game. All I've seen is what we played on the channel. But like there was like some, like the rollout of people becoming dragoons. Like there's always kind of like pitched as a twist, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's not like super surprising. We're collecting dragoons left and right up in here. But then
oh yeah,
like there are character deaths that was surprised by. So that was really cool.
that's true. You have 3 seconds if you've never played Dragon to skip a spoiler here.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, 0. The death of Lavitz
Yes.
was quite the twist as a kid, and it took me a lot longer to get to as a child than it did as a young adult, obviously,
Sure.
because it really takes about like a few hours of gameplay. But as a kid, I spent so long just trying to kill Frugal. And
Oh.
that was such a big deal to me because I couldn't do the additions. I didn't understand the system.
Well, that's big. That you should go into that because like the way the game works is, I think there's some Mario RPGs that have done this as well, where it's like there's like an action element of it where yeah, it's a JRPG where it's turn based, but then you have to time these button presses, and it makes a massive difference in terms of the damage output that you're doing. But if you're not doing that,
Yes,
which you weren't, then yeah, I can see how you would be getting running into some challenges.
right. I had to really think of every battle ahead of time because if I even got the double slash, which is Dart's basic edition, that was a fluke because it was all based on lining up your pressing of the X with the boxes coming together. And I
Yeah,
just didn't know that because there's a tutorial that you can very easily skip.
very easily skip. Yes.
You kind of have to know it's there almost, or just talk to every character you see.
Yeah.
And so I had no idea. And so my basic idea was to plan out when I'm going to become a dragoon, how much I can use my healing potions, who's going to use them when, and just lucking it out. And so I got to a point in the game where you fight an enemy that, whoops, lost an AirPod. An enemy that punishes you for becoming a dragoon for more than one turn. And
Mm,
that was the end of it for me. I
yeah.
couldn't beat it as a kid. I had to learn the addition system and come back and beat it as an adult. And even in my playthrough recently, I had to fight that boss 5 times to
Wow.
defeat it, even with my knowledge of the addition system and my knowledge that it was going to punish me if I became a dragoon, was not enough for me to defeat it without several attempts.
Wow. When did you find out about the edition system, and like how was that revelation for you?
Oh man, I already loved the game and it
Right.
made it just so much better. It was when I was a teenager.
Okay.
My second playthrough, I would say, started when I was 14. I'm trying to remember when I beat it. It was at a time that I was a partying age teenager because that's what ruined the final cutscene for me was leaving for a
Right.
party.
Right.
So it must have taken me another like 3 years still, because I was not partying as a 14-year-old when I started it the second time, but I was as like a 16-year-old. So I guess at the age of 14 was when I discovered the addition system.
And was it just a matter of you were talking to everybody this time, and then you learned the mechanics, or was it just you saw the? Because I mean, it does
I
the
think I just literally, I actually have no idea. I
okay,
genuinely am unsure how I found out about it, because nobody told me.
yeah,
I think I just wanted to play it again. I don't think I found the tutorial either. I think I was just like, what is this? Oh, shit. When I hit the box, when it's at the other box, it does this?
yeah.
Okay. And that was my whole understanding was just, I think it was just coincidence. I think
Wow.
I just happened to figure it out.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's not like it's not like it's very obvious like the boxes on the screen. Like you can't miss those.
Right.
But just like yeah, I can see how as a kid you wouldn't understand, especially if you hadn't played an RPG before. Because like for me, I think I would have picked up on that pretty quickly now. Like even maybe when I was a teenager, it's hard to say. But like just because of my experience with the genre, because they don't typically have those boxes on the screen. But like if you haven't played one, then you don't know that then yeah, I could totally see how you could miss that.
Yeah, I thought it was just style as an 8-year-old, but as a
Yeah,
14-year-old, it really stood out to me.
sure. I can see that. Thinking back on my brief time with it is I just remember with obviously the lava stuff was one of them, but I remember uh you go to like that fair at some point and like there's all the little mini games that you do.
Oh, yes,
And
those are
I just
horrible.
did them all just absolute, just horrendous. Just it blew them all just as bad as you possibly could. I think you even made like a short on it on the channel.
I did. I remember that now.
Yeah, just me just getting completely destroyed in all those games. And every single one, I was like, okay, I'll do better at this one. And then every single one was just as bad as the one before.
They're hard. They're freaking hard.
They're
It's kind of
crazy
a waste
hard.
of time to even try to do well at them.
Yeah, and it wasn't like important like for you to do well. You just kind of do enough of them and then the story moves on or whatever. So that's what we did. We
Yeah.
just got completely destroyed on these carnival games and moved on.
Yep. As nature intended.
Yes, exactly. That is kind of accurate for the way the world works. I guess the last thing I'd be curious here is, obviously you've played a lot of RPGs and JRPGs since playing Legend of Dragoon. So, do you really feel like it is the best one, or is it just like your first one that you play as a kid, and it's just like kind of impossible for you to separate that experience and like the nostalgia of it?
Um, I don't know if I would say it's the best one, but it is very, very good, and it does have the strongest nostalgia factor for me. As you know, I still have a playthrough going. I've got it downloaded on my PS5 where I could finish it up at any time.
Sure.
And I've greatly enjoyed playing through it yet again as a 30-year-old.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. From what I played.
yeah, the nostalgia factor is strong, but it is genuinely a good game.
Yeah. And it's really cool that yeah, I really appreciate like it seems like this is something they should have been doing for a lot longer, but the fact that like on PlayStation they actually are bringing back these old games is really awesome because like it gives people the chance like me who never had Legend of Dragoon on the PlayStation 1 to actually go in and play it on modern hardware and like they even give you like the updated save system where you can save anywhere, you don't have to rely on like the in-game saves. Which is
Yes,
awesome.
brilliant addition.
Yes. So I can't say enough about that. Whoever was behind that idea on the current PlayStation team, and like it seems like every month they'll bring out a few games from either the PS1 or some. Now they're kind of doing some PS2. I know they just recently put like the Time Splitters games on there, which is like a very
Mm.
classic PS2 shooter. That is just such a cool thing that they're finally doing that, and it's part of why I really I think not everybody is super high on the PS5, but I am really high on it as like kind of like the ultimate machine to like almost any game that you want to play, you can play it on the PS5, which I really appreciate.
Yes, it's a really great console. I bought it on an impulse based on the release of
Resident
Resident
Evil,
Evil
right?
8 VR.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad I have it because I don't use the VR as often as I would like, but I do use the console a lot.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was playing some Baldur's Gate 3 earlier today. I actually ate shit and died early on in the campaign, but it was fun.
Sure. Yeah, and it's interesting kind of on that front too, because I remember when we were roommates, by the time that I moved in, you had the PS4 already, and I didn't. If you remember that, like I was still on the
Oh,
PS3.
wow.
Yeah, I was still on the PS3. So by the end of that first semester we were together, I did get it because obviously Fallout 4 was coming out. But yeah, that first until like November of well, I guess this is 2015. I did not have the PS4 yet, so I was kind of a late adopter. I remember yours was even a little bit different than mine, where my PS4, I'm actually sitting right next to it right now because up in my office is where my PS4 lives these days. Because obviously my PS5 is downstairs in my entertainment center. But I have like this second TV that actually I saved from. It's like a little 19-inch, and I saved it from my grandparents' house when they moved out of their house that they lived in forever. And
Hmm.
I have it just sitting on I have it's a pretty nice setup. I have like this really old like antique desk that was my grandfather's, and then I have this TV that we used to play all these games on back in the day. And I have my PS4 up here, which I don't turn on very often, but it is kind of cool to just like still kind of have it here, even though it doesn't get a lot of use. But I remember the big change for mine versus yours was that mine was like it's an actual power button, and yours was like a little touch. Uh,
Yes, which I hate about mine.
yeah, it is definitely worse.
Yeah, I
And
like the idea of it, but I hate the reality of it.
yeah, in that sense, that is sort of a point in the column of being a later adopter for hardware because I do refine it. But the reason I brought it up is because on the PS5 it was the opposite, where I was a day one buyer of the PS5. It's like the only console I can think of where I did that. And you were a super late adopter, so it's kind of funny how because I guess it makes sense because we kind of sort of
Yeah,
that earlier with you being more on the PC side these days.
yeah, yeah, it makes sense. It's more surprising that I bought a PS5 at all, really.
Yeah. But you feel like it was a worthy purchase, even though it's not
Oh, yeah.
necessarily getting the use out of it that you originally intended with the VR.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's getting more use as a console than I expected out of it without the VR.
Yeah, and even playing like older games on it, like just PS4 games even, like it's just so nice because like the load times are a lot faster. Like I remember when we briefly were had a Fallout 76 sort of playthrough going, and I remember
Yes.
you were still on the PS4. I think this was before you had your PS5, but you were playing on the PS4
Uh-huh.
so we could play together. And I remember I like exited the building and then like we had to wait like 15 more seconds for you to come out because you were still on the PS4 load times, and I was like, whoa, there's a noticeable difference right there.
Oh, yeah. Very noticeable difference. There was a boss, in fact, that we tried to fight together that I think loaded for you that I could not load in on. And
Oh,
my PS4 never loaded in on it.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, it's good for even if nothing else, even if it had like no PS5 games, at least for it's an excellent PS4.
Yes, it's a great PS4.
Yeah.
So, number one,
Here we
the
go.
greatest game of all
Of all
time
time.
is Overwatch.
Overwatch. So this is a funny. This is a big one. It's your number one game of all time. It's technically a game that you can no longer play, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I count Overwatch 2 and Overwatch as being the same game.
I could see that because it just completely replaced it, right? Like it's just if you search for Overwatch now in any storefront, it's just Overwatch 2.
It's just Overwatch 2.
Okay. Well,
But I think the 2 label is a big old waste of time, and it's the same game.
okay. So tell us
Um,
about this because like you were a pretty early adopter of Overwatch, right?
yes, I started playing on PS4 in 2017 with the 3 tank meta.
Okay.
That at the time you could be whatever role you wanted in the game, and the most popular thing to do was to play 3 tanks, 2 supports, and 1 DPS.
Okay.
And
So it's like that big fat guy with the chain or whatever. I'm trying to like remember these characters.
that was my favorite character to play. That is Roadhog.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, back in 2017, that was my favorite character was Roadhog.
Yeah.
The game came out in 2016. I think I actually started playing in May of that year. So I was like an early adopter, but it was already like season 3 when I started playing. So maybe it was not May of 2016 because that's when the game came out.
Yeah. So it must have.
It must have been a few months later. But I very much enjoy watching the esport of Overwatch. When Overwatch League came out, I watched multiple events live in person in Dallas, which I paid good money to go see, and they were freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Great times, both times I went. And God, what all to say about Overwatch? It's
Well, it definitely just as an outsider looking in. So in terms of me, my history with Overwatch is to be clear. I have played it, but it was actually I don't think I've ever actually played it when I was not with you, which is interesting because like I think it was in the Texarkana house. I had a pretty good little run there the first time I ever played it with McCree, and
yes.
that was about it. Like I never really played it again after that. But like from the outside looking in, it definitely was a big game in terms of you know, growing up, a lot of the multiplayer shooters were like the Call of Duty or the Halo style, where everybody kind of was on an even playing field. But with Overwatch, it was all of these very unique characters that had their own set of skills that would mix that you would use. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that was the first game to do that because obviously there was like the Titan. Well, no, it's Team Fortress.
Team Fortress.
They did that,
Yeah.
but this was obviously like a huge point in making that genre as mainstream as it is. So just as an outsider looking in, you got to give it credit for that at least.
Oh yeah, and I've played both. I played Team Fortress way before Overwatch came out, and I didn't like it.
Yeah,
It was not my thing. None of the classes that were in the game were very fun to me, and so I didn't play it more than once.
yeah.
And in that one time, I did try like every class, and played for a couple of hours, and I was like, I suck ass at this. This isn't really my thing. But Overwatch, when I remember seeing it, I watched a commercial and I had only recently found out about my seizure condition.
Oh,
And so I said to myself, I cannot play this because it's going to make me have seizures.
sure.
And then I was like, but it looks so fun. Fuck it. I'll have a seizure. I'll play the game. I don't give a shit. And it is very flashy. Probably has made me have some seizures before, but you live and you have a seizure or two if that is your brain.
Sure.
And you just have to decide for yourself, is this worth it to be seized-tastic?
Sure. You
Um,
decided the answer was yes.
I decided the answer was yes. And I've played it. I don't play much anymore because people are so good at it
Hmm.
that it's really hard.
Yeah.
Um, I think if I remember correctly, you told me that Brett had a similar experience where he
Oh,
played it first and then said everybody got too good. I can't play anymore.
yeah. I'll have to ask him what it was that made him stop. I can't remember if Overwatch still cracks his list because it absolutely did for a period. Like, there's no question Overwatch is on his list. But yeah, he played Overwatch like crazy. I like his most played game is definitely Destiny, but I wouldn't be
Hmm.
surprised if Overwatch was. It's got to be in the top 5. I know that he's done a lot of Fortnite as well, so that's probably up there. But yeah, he played the hell out of Overwatch. Whenever like you said, 2016, 2017, sort of the earlier days for sure.
Yeah, but I could still. Overwatch is one of the only other games on this list that I could see myself just like getting on at any given time and possibly having a good time. It's also possible at any given time that you will have a bad time with Overwatch,
Sure.
which is the downside to it, obviously. Because you can just eat shit and die and suck, and your team will talk shit to you, and that's a bad time.
Yeah.
But more often, I do okay. And if you do okay, then that's good enough to not have some shit talk to you, and really is a great experience of just the flow of gameplay and that aspect of I play support again. Um no, we didn't. I was about to say, I think we talked about League of Legends in the last episode. We absolutely did not. I play support in that game as well. But Uh, I play support in Overwatch and really get the most fun out of that because I can't aim worth a shit. I'm not really that great at mechanics, but I'm fine with going with the best strategy to support the people who are doing those things.
Sure.
And it just makes for a great time and it makes for a great esport to watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could see that. I see what you're saying too on the support side because actually since we live together, I have played a lot more multiplayer games than you would expect. Not like obviously it's still by far the genre that I play the least, but on the trophy episode I kind of go into some of the ones that I've played because of trophies. It's like what makes me go back and play them and like I have a goal in mind. And it's fun to do that too because like the one I played most recently is Battlefront 2. And I don't give like with the trophy mindset, I could not care less if I die 1,000 times in a match because I'm just trying to work on and usually what I'm working on no bearing whatsoever on whether my team wins or loses. Couldn't give less of a shit about that. I am trying to fulfill my objectives as a trophy hunter. And so when you go into it that way, it honestly kind of removes a lot of like the frustration aspect of it. And so like when I was playing Battlefield Bad Company 2, that was a great example because all those people have been playing that game since it came out, and they were all like these hardcore vets that were still, I mean, you had to be pretty hardcore about Battlefield Bad Company 2 to still be playing it in the year of our Lord 2023. And but I wasn't. I was just like going out there just feeling like, hey, I need to build up some XP with these with the 4 classes so I can get the trophy here. And and the reason I bring that up is because the my favorite class to play, I think it was in Bad Company 2 was the healer class because yeah, it was like nice to be able to like actually just like do some stuff and try to help out some people. And like in that one, you can actually like bring them back to life and stuff. And I could like focus on that instead of like just getting absolutely fucking owned by all these like people who were like do every map like the back of their hand.
Yes. It's great. Support is a really fun class to play in video games. I think it's
Agreed.
a little underrated because some people, I mentioned in the last video a lot more than this one that I really like brain dead experiences in
Yes.
gaming.
Right.
And that's kind of support is not really a brain dead experience in multi-gamer playing if you are doing it right, but it is the closest thing to it because you don't have to be the one to actively seek out every single play. You're just going along for the ride with what your teammates are doing.
Right.
Even if you are a playmaker support, you're still reliant on your teammates, and that's kind of a blessing and a curse. In Overwatch, you have a lot more control as a support, which if my aim were better, I would be great. I used to be a lot better at the game than I am. I made it to platinum as Moira mainly, Moira and Lucio, which won't mean, well, does that mean anything to you actually?
Um gosh, I'm not sure. I mean, like I kind of know what a lot of them sort of look like at the very least. I think Lucio wasn't he didn't he kind of have like a hip hop guy, like he had like a sound gimmick or whatever.
Yes, he heals through sound
Okay, yeah,
and
okay. So
speeds
I remember
people
that.
up.
And then who'd you say the other one was?
Moira.
Moira. Yeah, I don't know. Was she like into robots or something?
She is a scientist.
Okay, so maybe she's the one I'm thinking of. I don't know. Like I remember like the ones I remember off the top of my head. Like obviously I remember Tracer. I remember the purple girl that was a sniper. I
Widowmaker.
remember. Yeah, that's right. I remember Genji because Brett really loved Genji.
Hmm.
And then wasn't there like another like there was because like they had like stories sort of like through that they would like put these videos out and like Genji
Oh
kind of had
yeah.
this rivalry with this other guy. Um,
Hanzo.
yeah. So I remember him, and he was like a bow guy, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I remember him. I remember Junkrat. I remember I Roadhog, like you mentioned. Obviously, I remember McCree because that was I don't know why that was the one that I played, but that I guess we just figured that he was simple enough where I.
You were really good. You played against bots,
Oh,
but
okay.
you were very good. And then I remember I have a strong memory of the time that you played Overwatch with me because you looked at me and you said, I feel like I've done it all. And you played one match against bots on Hollywood.
Wow. Well, see now if I was gonna play, which honestly I don't even know how the trophies work with Overwatch because like they completely removed Overwatch 1, which obviously had its own trophies, and then I guess like they just replaced them with Overwatch 2. I really have no idea. But if I was gonna play again, that's what I would be focusing on. And I would just absorb the game that way. But like yeah, so I remember I guess what was that about half of them that I said. I remember there was like the soldier guy. That was another one that I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You
I
remember a
feel
lot of the original characters.
yeah. So I feel like I could probably have a decent enough time with it, but yeah, I just it is still kind of intimidating just in the sense that all the characters are so different, and so it feels like a lot to learn. Whereas like when I'm playing Bad Company or I'm playing Battlefront 2, I really don't have it. Like Battlefront 2 has more classes than you think, but generally it's like this guy has a jetpack or he doesn't. This guy's a heavy. This guy's I don't know, a sniper or whatever. Like you kind of get
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to like wrap your head around it. And then of course like the Jedi come in and you know how those work too. But yeah, it didn't feel like there was like just a ton for me to learn. Whereas like with Overwatch, I mean, I don't know how many characters are up to this point, but it just seems like a lot to kind of wrap your head around.
Yeah, there are like 30 characters at this point.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a
But
lot.
I could see like that how that engenders like a lot of positivity about it because like if you're really into the game, then you always kind of feel like probably that you have things to figure out and learn. So you know, I could see I definitely see why this game is as popular as it is.
Yeah, I have been watching a lot, but I have not played since the most recent character, Juno, came out, and she looks like a lot of fun. But having not played her, I don't really understand exactly what she does. So when I watch the videos now, I'm a little bit confused because she's in the meta.
Okay.
And I'm like, when her ultimate comes out, it's a huge beam of light, and everyone reacts like, "Oh, there's the Juno ultimate." I'm like, but what is it actually? What is this doing? Because it's not damaging anything.
Right.
I think it's increasing everyone's attack, but I can't tell just from watching this.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, obviously I have an idea. I did think about a couple other characters I remember, which are Mercy and Reaper. I remember those.
Oh yeah, both very good characters.
Yeah. So there you
I
go.
used to be a Mercy main.
Well,
I
yeah,
think
'cause she's a support character.
my second most played character of all time.
Yeah. I think there were some times I must have played a little bit more than just that time with McCree because I do remember playing as Reaper as well.
Oh, I don't remember that. You must have played sometime when I was not around.
Maybe I did. I didn't play like a lot with him, but I just remember, he was it's pretty simple as far as the characters go. He had the two shotguns or whatever, and you shoot people with shotguns. I can wrap my head around that.
Yeah, pretty much. That's about all there is to it.
Yeah. Um,
Teleport around with him.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that. So one thing, I guess the last thing that is kind of interesting to think about here is I know so this is obviously a game that you played 2016, 2017, whatever, but you were adult at the point that you played it, early 20s. And that's actually around the time, almost exactly the same time frame where I played my number one game of all time, which is Final Fantasy VII. So it's kind of interesting to like think about that because a lot of people when they pick their number one game, it's like a game that they played when they were very young, and then they kind of hold it up as on a pedestal as a game that nothing else can ever really beat. But because our games are a little bit more recent than that, I wonder if how you feel about that. Like, do you feel like there is another game that could come along and surpass Overwatch for you, or do you think Overwatch is always going to be number one?
Oh man, the way that Overwatch makes me feel when I make a truly good play, I don't think there's anything that could make me feel the same way because like I've really experienced this more as tank than as DPS, but there have been moments where I've made plays. I remember this one time. This was not as tank, this was as healer. I was playing as Mercy and my tank player died behind enemy lines and I dove through this window to revive my tank player and he yelled at me, "Mercy, you're a mad lad." And that has stuck with me for like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
That partner yelling at me that I was a mad lad. And I just don't know that any other game can really make me feel the same way that a good play in Overwatch does because the adrenaline that it drives,
Hmm.
like, I don't know, this may be a bit of oversharing almost, but I really like to drink when I play Overwatch.
Okay.
And the adrenaline rush that Overwatch gives me is so intense that it makes me not really feel alcohol.
Wow.
And so it's a brain rush stronger than drugs almost.
Yeah. That is saying something for sure. I
Yes.
think the game that I feel that way about, like the closest I feel that way about is Bloodborne, having just done it. But like, yeah, like going up against a boss and just like, particularly because there's all these different things you can do. You can summon people in, and you can do like the NPC summons and stuff like that. But going up against like a really hard boss, especially whenever you're not even necessarily ready for it, and just like taking it down one on one, it's like God, that is and like it gets your heart racing and stuff. Like the adrenaline.
Yeah.
Like that, I know, I kind of know what you mean, even though it's a very different context, obviously.
Yeah. And there's just really the competitive aspect. There are obviously competitive games that are like it in that sense of having a ranked mode and having the high level of competition, like, League of Legends or Valorant or whatever.
Yeah.
But the way that your team melds together, Overwatch just has synergetic experiences like nothing I've ever experienced in my life.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense, and that's why it's number one.
Yes. And the live events that I've been to, I think also
Mm,
really put it over the top for me
sure.
because those were a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I went to one very briefly before the birth of my son, and I watched my favorite team get crushed.
Oh, well, that's a nice memory for you.
Yeah, I was like, well, this is what you pay your money for sometimes. That's live entertainment for you.
That's right, especially when it comes to competition.
Yeah,
A lot
you
of
never
Cowboys fans
know.
feel that way these days.
Oh God, I bet they do. What are they like 1-3 this season?
No, well, first of all, we're a little bit further than that, but they're like, I think they're 3-4. But I think all of
Three
their
and
losses.
four? Wow. The last game I paid attention to, sorry, this is off the topic of gaming now. But they were playing. Who were they playing against? Where they were getting their asses handed to them, and then they
Yeah,
ended up losing by 3 points
I
in
think
the
that's
end. They
probably the
had an
Ravens.
onside kick.
Yeah,
The
it was.
Ravens game?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Ravens game. I watched the onside kick play of that game and not the rest of it, and I was like, there's some hope here. And then I saw the score the next day and was like, oh, there was no hope. Turns out.
I remember that. Yeah, there was a little bit. That would have been quite a comeback, but yeah, they couldn't quite do it. And that was at home, and then they got completely decimated by the Lions at home. So,
Oh no!
well, the Lions are like really great this season, actually, believe it or not. Um,
Oh,
yeah, it's
that's hard to believe
I
because
know. Yeah,
the
they've been so bad for so long, but suddenly they've really turned it on. I've only really been, like I said earlier, like been really paying attention to the NFL the last couple of years, where I've really gotten into it, and there's actually a case to be made that the Lions might be the best in the league. The Chiefs are still undefeated,
oh wow.
which are that's always hard to get past the Chiefs. But yeah, the Lions, I think they've only lost one game. But unlike a lot of teams,
Are
go ahead.
are the Chiefs not the reigning Super Bowl
Yeah, they
champions?
are two in a row.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Uh,
two in a row.
yeah, so they're going for a three-peat right now, and they are undefeated, so it's very possible. But yeah, the Lions, what makes I really enjoy the Chiefs actually because they typically win, but they win by a very small margin, and it's like they enough stuff goes wrong for them, and then they squeak by where it's extremely entertaining. Whereas like the Lions, they've just been like stomping people, like just like they've beaten people by like 20 points, 30 points. I think
Oh man.
the Cowboys game, it was like 40 something to like 9 or something like that.
Oh
It was
no.
yeah, it was devastating. So like they are like really really good right now. So we'll have to see if they can keep that going. I want to do a I don't know if when we'll do it, but I think me and Brett, because Brett has been into it as well, and maybe even his sister Lauren, she's actually been really into it this season. So I'm thinking about doing an NFL focus episode on them where we like kind of make our picks for who we think is gonna win the Super Bowl or whatever.
Ah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because you were always like a big Cowboys fan, right? But
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I remember you talking about them, but you know, and I would pay attention to a degree. I always yeah, really, my favorite time of year is this time of year, like November and particularly December. And I always associate that with football. So I think I'm kind of that has like seeped into my brain a little bit where like like just part of my affection for this time of year kind of rubs off on the NFL season because like when football starts up, you know, it's kind of getting close to that time period.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it just like over the last couple of years, it's just kind of clicked for me. So it is kind of funny how you know, like I'm not a dad yet, but I'm kind of going into dad mode on my on my hobbies where I'm like I'm a football fan now, and I take forever to play my games, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of
That'll be the episode anytime now. SlowBurne is having a child.
yeah, well, you know, it'll happen eventually. We're kind of probably gonna get through at least the middle of 2025 before we start going for that. But we'll, you know, maybe by the end of the year, maybe that'll be on the menu. But I'll have to keep you posted.
Oh man. That's the most important message of this whole podcast.
There you go. But anyways, that's Tree Truck Sean's list. It's been a lot of fun kind of going through this very varied list. Like we mentioned, only one repeat in terms of the series. So we have 24 different series represented here. Some of them one-offs like Guns of Duel. But you know, it's been really cool like hearing your perspective on your top 25 games and hearing like the stories that you've had has been really interesting as well. So thanks for joining me and for helping me get this series going with the top 25s.
Absolutely. I have loved doing it. I love listening to your podcast, whether I'm on it or not. And great stuff.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's fun to do just as it's like as an excuse for me to sort of reconnect with people and then have conversations like this. So obviously you can come on anytime, and we definitely want to do a Wildfire Gaming episode, and then we have some other ideas kind of kicking around for future podcasts. So stay tuned for that. And of course, thanks for leading us the music for the intro and outro. Really love being able to utilize that.
Of course. Yeah, it makes me feel good. I know with Andrew, I've got at least one fan all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like I've shown, like I think Reagan actually kind of gets a kick out of Brilliance as well, because now obviously she associates it with the with or not the channel, but with the podcast. But like you know, I've mentioned to you before how that's like an amazing running song. So whenever I go for runs, I really it's always a kick whenever that comes on. But yeah, it's I look back on and you know part of it is I can look back on when you were actually like coming out with that stuff. So like that was kind of that kind of adds to my enjoyment of it, that and the instrumental EP as well. But it is I don't know. I do enjoy that, and then you know when the instrumental stuff comes on for the when I'm working doing my work and it comes on my instrumental playlist. So
Yeah, because back in the day, you were like one of my guinea pigs for my
yeah.
musical projects. I would be like, hey, I've been writing this thing. Check it out.
Yeah, there was one in particular that I remember. It was like I think we were like waiting for Dr. VR for one of her classes, and you're like, listen to this that I did. And it was definitely on the what is it? Well, no, Supernatural Piece is one of the songs, but what is that?
It was the something Urban Future.
Yeah,
I can't remember exactly the
yeah,
name of the
Waking Urban Future.
song.
Yeah, I was trying to
Waking
remember
Urban Future.
yeah, I remember hearing that and I was like, oh yeah, this is some good stuff. And that is one that I have in my my instrumental playlist that'll come on every once in a while for me.
Yeah, that's one that I feel like I really look back fondly on that EP
Oh
as
yeah.
something that it's like, man, I really created something good here. And I feel like that is kind of an underrated track, so I really appreciated that you like that one.
Yeah, and I remember I just pulled it up here on Spotify, so I remember the cover because it's you like floating through space or whatever, which
Yes.
I love the art or like the colors that you use for that. But the what was it? Was that in our apartment where you took the picture on the chair?
No, my sister did that for me.
Oh,
She
okay.
is a brilliant photographer, actually.
Yeah.
And she took the picture and edited me into space.
Nice. Yeah. Well, that's a classic image as well. So anyway, yeah, thanks for the music and thanks for being on the pod. And we will look forward to having Sean on at least for the Wildfire Gaming retrospective, which hopefully we'll have to do very soon. I know you want to like go back and like kind of try to figure out what you would highlight on that, but I do think that'll be a fun one to do.
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, but I do want to be informed on our own material before I do that. So we'll see how long it takes me to really watch back through and get familiar with things again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll probably have to do the same thing, but that'll be a nice one to look forward to especially for all of the many millions of fans. And by millions, I mean, what are we up to 147 subscribers on our channel right now? So
Oh yeah,
the greatest channel with under 150 subscribers. So for all the
huge
fans,
numbers.
you have to look forward to that. But until then, until next time, stay tuned to Controlled Burns. We come into your favorite podcasting platform every Monday or the occasional Tuesday, depending on when I can get around to it. You can write in to the podcast at ControlledBurnes with an ES at gmail.com to have your own thoughts, questions, opinions, and ideas for the show read. And then if you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, like, review, whatever you can do whenever you listen to your podcast. So until next time, thanks again, Sean, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Okay. And until we come back to you through your earpods again, keep it warm.